Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. Zelenskyy addresses EU leaders at a security summit in Brussels, saying Putin must stop his unnecessary demands. At least 91 Palestinians killed and dozens wounded as Israeli strikes across Gaza again continue. And former Zimbabwean swimmer and two-time Olympic gold medalist Kirsty Coventry has been elected the president of the International Olympic Committee. Our top story today, EU leaders met at a summit in Brussels today to consider their defence strategy and how they can boost security measures for Ukraine. They agreed that no real negotiations are taking place at the moment after discussing Donald Trump's attempts to get Russia to agree on a ceasefire deal. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, who is visiting Norway, addressed them via video link. Let's take a look at just what he had to say.
Yesterday, I had a productive conversation with President Trump. From the very beginning, Ukraine has been advocating for what we are discussing now, an end to attack on energy and infrastructure and ceasefire at sea, and we continue to support these efforts. Our teams will also work towards achieving an unconditional full ceasefire on land. Please support this. Putin must stop making unnecessary demands that only prolong the war and must start fulfilling what he promises the world.
For more on this, I'm joined by our correspondent Stuart Smith, who is in Brussels. Stuart, thank you for joining me. Firstly, what else did Zelenskyy outline in his press conference today?
Well, he asked EU leaders to continue sanctions pressure on Russia until such a time, at least, that there is a ceasefire deal in place. He also asked the European Union for an additional €5 billion, something that he says will be essential for Ukraine to get the necessary artillery shells that it requires. And he said that he was interested in joining a new EU scheme called Rearm Europe, which is a way to fund around €150 billion of support for European defence industries, but also Ukraine would like to be part of that, saying it has a lot to offer any joint EU scheme because it has expertise and a defence industry which is now very capable when it comes to drones and anti-drone warfare, and also other technology which the EU suffers with. One interesting thing he also revealed during his press conference in Norway is that there will be Ukrainian representatives at upcoming talks in Saudi Arabia between Russia and the United States. They're not ever at any point going to be in the same room as each other, the Russian and Ukrainian delegation, and it will be a low-level technical team, and it's a discussion about ensuring safety in the Black Sea, but it's being seen as a form of progress with both teams, Ukraine and Russian, in one country, in one place, and while not talking about the peace as such, they are talking about issues that are affected by this war.
Stuart, what else have European Union leaders agreed to today?
The focus has been, for the first 2 hours on Thursday, Ukraine and what European Union leaders can do to help there. And they agreed at the end of that discussion to support the Kyiv-Washington call for an immediate ceasefire without any preconditions, something that Russia has not agreed to. But it took Hungary not signing to get that through in an unaltered form. Previously at EU summits, going back years, Hungary has been a sticking point when it comes to getting all 27 EU member states to agree on an issue. It could take days of extra negotiation just to get Budapest on side. Now it seems when it comes to the sticky issue of Ukraine, which Hungary sees very differently to the rest of the EU 26 member states, the leaders have just decided to produce documents and sign agreements that, where they don't require Hungary's support, just include the beliefs and opinions of the 26 EU member states. They've also been talking about competition, how to make the EU more competitive on the global stage, particularly with a view to the US and China. And on that vein, they've been discussing what they can do to boost the EU automobile sector, the steel and metals industry, and also the defence sector, with, while not being a part of formal discussions, a view on those UF tariffs, with many EU member states very upset that the EU's response to those tariffs has effectively really harmed many of the EU's industries, in particular member states, like alcohol tariffs being imposed on French wine and champagne, and also the Italian liquor sector suffering particularly as the US and EU trade war ramps up.
Meanwhile, in England, senior military leaders from the Coalition of the Willing are meeting to discuss their peacekeeping plans too. What's the latest there? Briefly for us, Stuart.
Yeah, more than 25 countries gathering for that, online and in person. The idea is, in this second technical meeting, to go into granular detail about what various countries from as far away as Asia can contribute if there is a ceasefire deal negotiated. The Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the UK, says it's important to have a plan ready in case that happens soon, but there is still the unaddressed question, in effect, of the fact that Russia doesn't want any NATO-flagged peacekeepers in Ukraine, would not accept that, which is a core component, it seems, of the plan that's currently being worked on.
Stuart Smith in Brussels, thank you so much for being across all that news for us. For more on this, I'm now joined by Professor Michael Semple from Queen's University Belfast, who spent many years researching armed conflict. Thank you so much for joining me. So we've just been speaking to Stuart in Brussels. All EU leaders have reaffirmed support for Ukraine's borders today, except Hungary, as Stuart just outlined. Earlier today, the Kremlin said Europe is party of war. How and where does the US fit into this puzzle?
Europe is trying hard to maintain a united line with the United States, while obviously unsure of what the US will be supporting as they go forward. So the EU is trying to stick with its support for Ukraine, to double down on a definition of what Ukraine is fighting for and what Europe will support in terms of what a free and sovereign Ukraine would look like. And the EU is trying to mobilize European resources for defense, which is something which the US has long requested by showing that they're willing to come up with the resources to defend themselves and to support Ukraine. They're trying to encourage the US to stick with them on this.
What does the limited ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia cover, and who is holding both countries accountable for upholding the ceasefire?
An excellent question, and one to which, unfortunately, there now are several different answers. The original version of the unconditional temporary ceasefire proposal, which was agreed between the US and Ukraine, was something which was to cover the whole of the front line and be at least a 30 days cessation to the fighting. But after the discussion between the US and Russia, this seems to be greatly reduced to just a pause in attacks on energy infrastructure, and even the definition of quite which infrastructure would be covered by that, even that is uncertain until they move towards technical talks. So it started off as a fairly limited ceasefire proposal. Now it's a very limited ceasefire proposal, the exact contours of which still have to be agreed.
Professor, Zelenskyy says he has not discussed US ownership of Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant with Donald Trump. That's despite the US talking of American ownership. Would US ownership of Ukrainian nuclear power plants offer a security guarantee for the country right now? It appears the minerals deal is off the table.
Yes, there seems to be an idea which also sort of pops up in slightly different forms. I can see that in principle, having a sort of a direct U.S. stake by ownership of assets or presence of their own personnel on the ground would give them a reason to keep on worrying about what's happening in Ukraine. But I think that we can take it from President Zelenskyy that there is no detailed proposal for that, and Zelensky's version is of course that he has considered how US could help them keep their nuclear infrastructure going, but has insisted that it's the Ukrainian state owns the nuclear infrastructure and it's going to stay that way. So yes, I think in principle, having an increased US stake in Ukrainian peace encourages it to keep on working to achieve that peace rather than just selling out.
Zelenskyy says Ukrainian and US officials will meet in Saudi on Monday. And we just also heard there from Stuart that separate talks will be happening there with Russian officials. Do you think this is a real step forward to the fact that everyone will be in the same place at the same time? It's a positive sign, do you think?
Absolutely. Nobody should underestimate the amount of work which is required in achieving an agreement, even for a temporary end to the fighting in a difficult conflict like this. So getting the parties together in Saudi Arabia is a major development. Now, of course, there are lots of doubts as to whether there is willingness on all sides, particularly on the Russian side, to go ahead with a meaningful agreement. But to give the best opportunity of getting there, then definitely having the Ukrainians accessible to discuss the details is really important. I think the very fact that even now we don't know exactly what the parameters of that temporary ceasefire agreement might be underlines the importance of having all parties accessible.
Professor Michael Semple from Queen's University, Belfast, thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you.
Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines today. Iran has released a French tourist who was detained by authorities for more than 2 years. French President Emmanuel Macron announced on social media that 34-year-old Olivier Rondeau is free and back with his family in France. He was arrested on the charges of conspiracy against the Islamic Republic and sentenced for 5 years in prison. President Trump will sign an executive order to shut down the Education Department today. It will mark the US leader's first attempt to shut down a cabinet-level agency. It comes as Trump and entrepreneur turned advisor Elon Musk seek to dismantle government departments and programs in an attempt to cut costs. Now, Greenpeace has been found liable for defaming an oil firm through protests. A US jury has ordered the environmental group to pay $600 million in damages to Texas-based Energy Transfer. The energy firm accused Greenpeace of trespass, nuisance, and a civil conspiracy against the Dakota Access Pipeline. The organization says it plans to appeal the decision and is worried about facing bankruptcy from this case. And finally, Finland has been named the happiest country in the world for the 8th year in a row now. That's according to the World Happiness Report that's been published today. Other Nordic countries, including Denmark, Iceland and Sweden, also claim the top spots. On the other end of the spectrum, Afghanistan has again been ranked as the unhappiest country in the world. At least 91 Palestinians were killed and dozens others wounded in Israeli strikes across Gaza earlier today as Israel continued to attack the Strip. A new ground campaign was launched yesterday with major vital roads closed off. Israel says Hamas is still holding 59 hostages, 24 of whom are believed to be alive. The two sides are still to agree on how to progress beyond the first stage of the ceasefire, which did expire earlier this month. We can go to our correspondent now, Giles Gibson, who is in Tel Aviv. Giles, thank you for joining me. Hopes for peace were high after the ceasefire deal, but with no second phase in sight and more than 430 people killed by Israeli strikes over the past 2 days, will we continue to see attacks like today's carry on?
Yeah, absolutely no sign of any sort of phase two, and airstrikes continuing, ground operations now underway by the Israeli military in Gaza, rockets being fired in the other direction by Hamas from Gaza towards Tel Aviv. So really we can say that the ceasefire as a whole has collapsed. So any sort of a new deal would pretty much have to be done from scratch. We heard in the last few hours from the Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz saying that he'd had a meeting with the Chief of Staff of the Israeli Defense Forces, approving the battle plans for the coming days in terms of the situation on the ground in Gaza. So really over the next few days, we expect the bombardment from the air to continue. We expect those ground operations to continue and both to potentially intensify.
Earlier, we actually mentioned the hostages being held by Hamas, Giles. Is that the main bone of contention for Israel right now?
Well, I mentioned that meeting that the Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz had in the last few hours, and he said that we will not stop in terms of the military action until all hostages are released. But at the same time, the hostages here in Israel have also become a very powerful symbol in terms of the opposition to this war. We've seen some very large protests for the second day in a row in Jerusalem, with demonstrators coming out and saying that this military action is putting the lives of the remaining hostages inside Gaza at risk. And these protesters are also angry about plans by the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to sack the head of the internal security service here in Israel, known as Shin Bet.
Hamas claimed they fired rockets at Israel for the first time since the ceasefire agreement did collapse, Giles. Where were these rockets targeting and what damage did they cause?
Yeah, this was a really significant moment because until now we hadn't seen Hamas actually responding in a military way to these airstrikes which started in the early hours of Tuesday. There was no clear answer as to why they had not responded yet. Perhaps they were trying to show restraint. Perhaps their military capabilities had simply been degraded over many months of war, or perhaps it was suggested they were preserving ammunition because they were preparing to fight the ground offensive by Israeli forces. Now, Hamas didn't actually specify exactly what targets they were aiming at when they fired those rockets towards Tel Aviv. But we did hear from the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, saying that one of the rockets was actually intercepted, and then two others fired towards Tel Aviv landed in what were described as open areas.
Giles Gibson in Tel Aviv, thank you so much for joining us. We can now go to Badawa Hassan, a researcher from Amnesty International for Israel and Palestinian territories, who joins us from Ramallah. Thank you so much for joining us. So we just heard there from Giles, who was explaining the situation on the ground to us. Can you tell us more about what's happening?
So just a reminder that Israel has been fully besieging Gaza since the 2nd of March, blocking 1 week later the electricity supply to the sole functional water desalination plant. This comes on the heel of over 15 months of extremely severe blockade where Israel used the imposition of conditions calculated to bring about the destructions of Palestinians through means of mass displacement, denial of aid, destruction of critical infrastructure to the survival of the population, in addition to the several indiscriminate and direct attacks on the population, inflicting on them physical and mental harm over such an extended period of time. And now with the unilateral decision of Israel to break the truce and resume its relentless bombardment over Gaza, the situation there, and as Amnesty, we do have a field worker base in the Gaza Strip, and we've been researching the situation there over the past 16 months. It's nothing short of catastrophic, really, especially in the north, where already Israel's several attacks on the healthcare system has all but decimated it. In one area, once a Shifa hospital, once the largest hospital, not only in Gaza, but in the entirety of the occupied Palestinian territory, now only has 3 functioning beds. The main hospital receiving the wounded is Al Ahli Baptist Hospital, which is usually a very small hospital. Very few ambulances are working because of the lack of fuel. Israel has banned the entry of anything, including fuel, food, and water, since the 2nd of March. The wounded are carried on carts, horse-drawn carts, some on the shoulders of their loved ones. When you said that there were 90 people who were killed and dozens injured, behind this word dozens injured, there is almost a death sentence, because many of those injured will not find any proper treatment, including for those who would have been easily cured had the situation been anything close to normal. The news we're receiving about amputations being conducted on children without anesthesia, the situation, hospitals are completely incapable of treating the volume of the wounded that they are receiving. We're kind of returning to the very first days of the attacks, only now the impact is so much greater precisely because of the destruction of critical infrastructure, particularly the healthcare system in Gaza.
It's an extremely difficult time at the moment in Gaza, but Hamas has been accused of not releasing the remaining hostages. Are they continuing to put their own people in danger by not abiding to this call from Israel?
Look, it's very important to reiterate, civilian hostages should never have been taken in the first place. Palestinians arbitrarily detained without charges or trial by Israel should never have been held in jail in the first place, including healthcare workers. Both parties are obliged unconditionally, Hamas is obliged to release all civilian hostages it's holding and treat the others captives humanely. Israel is obliged to release all Palestinians arbitrarily detained unconditionally and treat all others humanely, while also ensuring ICRC access. Now, the fact that Israel cannot collectively punish the civilian population, it cannot. It's very clear, collective punishment is prohibited under international law, regardless of what the purpose. You cannot treat 2 million people living in Gaza presuming that they are Hamas. You cannot use blockade, including cutting off water, access to water, electricity, fuel, and food as a means to pressure the civilian population. So international law here is super clear. There is no space to have even question marks over what Israel is doing. In addition to the throwing of leaflets, what we are seeing now through the leaflets being thrown on the calling for mass displacement of the population again, the threats against civilians, you either stay or leave, you either stay to face killing or leave and be ethnically cleansed. So all of these, what Israel is doing has absolutely no basis in international law, no justification. That Hamas has held hostages unlawfully does not justify any of the practices, policies, and acts that we are seeing by Israel since the 7th of October, but particularly since the resumption of the war.
Badawa Hassan, a researcher for Amnesty International. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.
Now, former Zimbabwean swimmer Kirsty Coventry has been elected as the president of the International Olympic Committee. Coventry is an Olympic double gold medal winner and becomes the first woman and the first African in the job. Here's how she heard the news.
Dear friends and colleagues, the 144th IOC session has elected as the 10th president of the International Olympic Committee, Mrs. Kirsty Coventry.
For more on this, I'm joined by sports journalist and editor Mark Lomas. Mark, I'm a very proud girl from Zimbabwe today. We're actually from the same city. So why is this such a momentous moment, not just for me and Zimbabwean girls, but for the whole world of sport?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, congratulations, I guess, for you as well, for a fellow Zimbabwean. No, it's a massive position in world sport. If you think about positions of influence, probably president of FIFA, president of the IOC, these are the absolutely most influential positions in global sport. And Kirsty Coventry now has one of those. So she has the ability to influence sporting policy and to influence the Olympic movement over the next 8 years, at least 8 years, potentially 12. And of course, she described it as an extraordinary moment, and it absolutely is, because, as you mentioned, the first woman and first African to hold the post. So the opportunity there is to influence sport over the next 8 to 12 years. Plenty of Olympic cycles, Summer Olympics, obviously coming up in Los Angeles in 2028, Brisbane 2032, and from a Gulf perspective, it's interesting because both Saudi Arabia and Qatar have been tipped to potentially bid for the Olympics in 2036, and Kirsty Coventry may still be around then to have a role in that decision as well.
Yeah, it's absolutely thrilling. I was just thinking today, someone all the way from Zim doing so well. But there's been some controversy. Coventry was widely seen as Thomas Bach's preferred choice. What more can you tell us about the transparency of the voting process?
It's not that transparent, I guess, is the main thing. So, yeah, the process is quite a closed process. So those who were voting, I think there were 97 people who ended up voting. Kirsty Coventry, it was expected actually to be a close race, and it wasn't. Kirsty Coventry won in an absolute majority of 47 in the first round of voting, but no one has been able to kind of pin their colours to the mast. You're not allowed to be able to say who you're voting for. It's quite opaque. It's been compared to the voting in of the Pope, for example, in terms of how behind closed doors it is. People had to come when they voted and hand their phones in at the door. So yeah, it's a very behind closed doors process. But Kirsty Coventry was seen as one of the leading contenders, but I would say that Lord Coe, the British former Olympian and president of World Athletics, was up there, and Juan Antonio Samaranch as well, whose father was a former IOC president. They were right in contention as well, thought to be, but in the end, Kirsty Coventry, she swept the board, and I think a lot of people still respect IOC President Thomas Bach outgoing, and I think her allegiance to him worked very much in her favour in this vote.
I just wanted to touch on protecting women's sport. It's really been in the spotlight, and Lord Coe said he would put a blanket ban on transgender women competing in the female category if he was elected. We also saw Donald Trump signing an executive order essentially doing the same thing. How is the IOC expected to deal with these concerns going forward?
Yeah, it's a great question. Obviously, coming on the back of the Paris Olympics as well, with the controversy with boxers Iman Khatif and Lin Yuting, it's a big talking point in sport right now. Kirsty Coventry she's nailed her colours to the post, I think, already. So she said that she would also call for a blanket ban, although she has said that the dialogue between stakeholders is needed. But in an interview last month, she said that it was essential for maintaining the integrity of women's sport, that transgender athletes were not allowed to compete in female events.
And I just want to shift gears slightly. former Formula One team owner and broadcaster Eddie Jordan has died at the age of 76. What will his legacy be?
Oh, Eddie, as a fan of Formula One growing up in the 90s, Eddie Jordan was such an important figure. He's charismatic, colourful, beyond Formula One. He was a drummer, he did loads of work for charity, but he'll be best remembered as the team owner of Jordan and for blooding some youngsters into Formula One, including Michael Schumacher, Heinz-Harald Frentzen, Giancarlo Fisichella. Michael Schumacher, obviously, head and shoulders above the rest there. But yeah, I still remember when Damon Hill won Jordan's only F1 Grand Prix in Belgium, and just Eddie Jordan's celebrations were absolutely remarkable. A great man and a big loss for motorsport. He had a great career afterwards in the media as well. Just such a charismatic, special figure in Formula One.
Dare I say it, I remember Formula One in the 90s too, watching it with my father. But thank you so much, sports journalist and editor Mark Lomas, for bringing us all of that.
Pleasure.
Let's take a look at the top business news now. Nike is expected to post its steepest revenue decline in nearly 5 years in its quarterly results on Thursday. This comes as its new products fail to attract Americans reluctant to snap up non-essential items like sporting goods and clothing. Downloads of Nike mobile app for the quarter were down 35% from a year earlier, while foot traffic at Nike stores was also down 11%. Turkish markets are showing signs of stabilizing on Thursday after plunging to a record low. That's as authorities took action to offset any spike in demands for dollars following the shock detention of President Erdogan's main political rival. The central bank says it was monitoring currency markets and intervening when necessary. Turning to sports news now, and Chelsea have completed the double signing of Sporting Lisbon midfielders Giovanni Kenda and Dario Isu for a combined fee of over $80 million. 17-year-old Kenda will join Chelsea for a fee of up to $57 million, but will remain in Lisbon until the end of the 2025-2026 season. The Portuguese pair are the latest young players signed by the London club. And tennis world number 3 Carlos Alcaraz does not support the legal action being taken against governing bodies by the Players Union co-founded by Novak Djokovic. On Tuesday, the Professional Tennis Players Association filed papers criticising the schedule, ranking systems and control over image rights. Both the ATP and the WTA Tour have been critical of that very lawsuit. A reminder of our top stories. Zelenskyy addresses EU leaders at their security summit in Brussels, saying Putin must stop his unnecessary demands. At least 19 Palestinians killed and dozens wounded as Israeli strikes across Gaza continue. And former Zimbabwean swimmer and double gold medalist Kirsty Coventry has been elected as the president of the International Olympic Committee. And that's all from us on W News. Thank you so much for joining us. The dressing room is coming up next. And of course, don't miss Tom Burges Watson. Good night and thank you for joining me.
Arabiya News, we go beyond the headlines.
From the latest breaking news to in-depth coverage of global events.
We're not bought or sold. Nobody owns us.
The loss of life, the destruction of property. The conflicts are such a terrible thing.
Context and analysis to help you see the full picture.
The world is in a very dangerous place.
Join us on Arabiya News.
It's very impressive.
Where knowledge meets perspective.
Welcome to the dressing room with our Arabiya News. We got a special guest filling in for Colton today. A great friend of all of ours, a great player, had a great career. I hated playing against him. Mr. Sean Wright Phillips.
Hello, good. You all right? Very good, mate. You know what, right? Everyone who says about left backs you talk to, Ashley was the same.
Yeah.
Hated playing against him. Nightmare.
It was him and Aaron Lennon.
Yeah.
I used to call him like, it was like a bouncy ball, you know, like the rubber ball.
Yeah.
Even if he kicked him and he was falling over, he just bounced straight up and carry on running.
Yeah, I actually remember you doing that. Running. I was playing for Chelsea. Someone kicked you. You run, done a Sonic the Hedgehog roll, and still got the ball.
Mate. Rapid, score goals, everything.
Yeah.
And he'd always run back with me as well. Never used to get a look in.
Yeah.
I didn't like running back with you. I had no choice.
That's part of my game, to try and run people into the ground.
Run them into the ground, yeah. Yeah.
How you been, Geez? You be good?
Good, yeah, man, good. Just busy working as we do. A lot of talking now rather than them playing, of course.
Yeah.
They're getting used to it.
You do a lot for City, don't you?
Yeah, a lot for City and a lot for the PLP as well. Yeah. So it's more than enough for me.
What
trying to catch up with Joe. And
mate, I'm trying to get him out of the night out, haven't we?
Yeah, I know. We need you on. Yeah, he's been slotted in. You got too much work on.
You lot missed the last one.
We did.
Oh, we did. Yeah, me and you missed that one, didn't we? Yeah.
I made it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I was going to say to you, right? So you're working with Manchester City and you're doing like the ambassadorial stuff and you're doing the PLP stuff, which is the global arm of Premier League. But what do you prefer doing? Do you like breaking down the football games or do you like doing the social stuff with Man City? What's your favourite?
Both, you know. I think the social stuff I'm always going to love because they do a lot with kids, especially when you go out to like India, places in South Korea and Japan. They're pretty cool trips. But the punditry stuff, like at first I didn't think I was going to enjoy it. And my first show, like, they just kind of chucked me in the deep end. It was like with Dad and Alan Shearer. So I was like, wow. So I was a little bit nervous the first one, but now I'm starting to enjoy it and starting to do more in terms of like before I just let them kind of break there and pick the slots that you want to talk about. Whereas now I'm getting more comfortable and confident enough to like say, no, this is how I feel like it should have been. So I'm enjoying it as well.
I like the ones you do with your dad where it's Arsenal against City. I like them ones.
That's good, isn't it?
Brilliant. Someone's always having one up on the other, aren't they?
It's weird, especially the time in City where they were chasing City or City were behind and coming in. I've tried to be patient. Whereas Dad shoots early. You know what he's like? His mouth just goes straight away. And I'm just like, cool. So when City, I just waited for my time and it just worked out perfectly.
It did. Nice. Listen, it's good to have you. We missed the big man this week.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
We do. Where is he?
I know where he is, but I did know where he is.
I see
he's abroad somewhere.
Yeah,
oh no, he's Seth's team. He's over there.
Como.
Yeah, he's over there.
What's a gig this geezer's got?
Oh yeah,
he's going to Como.
Although, mate, typical Carlton.
Yeah.
What do you think happened on the way to the airport?
Go on.
Got his passport.
Yeah.
Oh,
he calls me. He calls me. I think. Guess what? I knew straight away, you've got your passport. He went, yeah, do you know what is in my jacket? And last minute I thought, I'm going to wear a different jacket.
See, fashion.
He had to change his flights.
Well, listen, we wish, I don't know what he's doing there, but I know he'll have a nice glass of red wine and a bit of pasta when he's on Como, on Lake Como.
It might have been the poker night.
Yes, that was good.
That played a part in that. It was probably a bit fragile, I'd say. The next day.
We had a good night. Friday night, was it, Bridgie, around your house?
Yeah, it was a long day. We must have started around 3 o'clock, finished around midnight.
Yeah, it was good.
It was a good night.
We had
he ended up clearing up.
Who? Coley, Coley. How did he win? Because there was some
you?
Poker play. Yeah, I know. How did I win? I had no clue what was going on. The only thing I've seen the poker players on telly and they wear the glasses, so you can't, because I've got there's no like hiding if I've got my eyes light up if I've got a hand. So we was playing, but it was wild, wasn't it? It was a nice night. Music was playing. Yeah, was it 11, 12 of us? Carter come in.
There was a couple. My youngest came in and had a little game. He lasted about 10 minutes. Chev took him down. It was brutal. He was unlucky though. He was unlucky. He played it well. He played it well. He walked in. He went, it's like the mafia. There was a couple of serious poker players. Well, one definitely was Aaron, wasn't it? My old agent Aaron. He plays a bit serious.
Yeah.
So I think playing with the likes of us was a bit difficult for him. He was like, what is going on?
Do you know what the wildest thing was? There was a few drinks in, so we was all very merry. This was late on, and and Wendy come in and said Colton's on The Chase. So there was a rerun of Colton on The Chase, and we got to get this on the screen. So we got the big man on the screen, and it was him, and he was chatting to Bradley Walsh, and I was thinking, this ain't going to go well for him. I was thinking, but he done well, didn't he?
Mate, fair play.
He got onto the board.
There ain't no chance I'm going on that.
But listen, he answered questions I didn't know he had them in the locker, and it was good to see. It was a good night. What have
You've been up too much,
mate? Well, I had my first experience of trolling people back on Instagram. Yeah.
I see someone called you a sausage.
Yeah.
This was after you saying PSG would go far in this competition and they were coming up against Liverpool, right?
What fans need to listen? I've stayed out of all of that.
What they need to realise is you were right.
Yeah, no, they need to listen. But what they need to realise, right? We get paid for giving our opinion, right? Yeah. I've got to be unbiased. Right? I watched PSG play twice at the back end of they were dreadful at the start, but I watched them and I could just see it all coming together. And I saw Liverpool and they started to look a bit frail. Like there was a couple of results leading up to that game where I thought, and then the first leg, I think, was the biggest smash and grab I'd seen in football. So I just had to say what I see. I thought PSG would win the game. And then I don't usually go on and look at it, but then I was getting opened up. I thought, let me give these people a little bit. So, I think it's all tongue in cheek.
You were enjoying it, weren't you? You enjoyed it. I could tell by the messaging.
There was a lot of people that were enjoying it, but it's all... listen, I've got nothing against Liverpool. You know, I played for them. You know, it didn't work out for me there. But, people don't like it, even if you say you think their team's going to get beat. I wasn't even saying... Their team's amazing. But I thought PSG would do them, and they did. So... No.
You're right again. You're right again, mate. You're right again.
I can't help myself, mate. Yeah, but...
my kid had the independent school, the prep schools.
That was good, geez.
Championship this weekend.
Yeah.
So they ended up winning it. So Park was ill all week, and a few of the kids were ill all week, to be fair. But they all ended up going. Park was just about feeling all right, and a couple of the kids battled through it. But, mate, it's brilliant, honestly. I'm not going to lie, there was tears of joy.
Really?
There was a couple of teardrops that come down just to see his face afterwards. But it went to penalties in the quarters and the semis and the final.
Yeah.
And to be honest, they were deserved winners.
Yeah.
Like, they had a few chances in the semis and the finals. Like, they dominated it. But he made a save in the quarters, semis, and the final. Like in the final, he tipped a save onto the post.
I'm trying to figure this out as well.
He's a goalkeeper, right? So he were in the group chat and he's sending us. He's made the save, great. The quarterfinals, like Bridgie weren't. It's like there's like clapping, like hey, like because you have to be respectful. Final comes, Parker's in goal, and he's filming it, and I said,
I am one of them people that stays really quiet as a parent. I stay really quiet, I encourage him a little bit. But I couldn't help myself. I was absolutely buzzing for him. It was just a smile on his face. It's for all of them. Do you know what? They all played so well. They're a great school team.
Yeah.
They can all read the game really well.
Yeah.
And like I said, there was a couple of kids. One of the kids played the first, I think his name's Arlo. He played the first 3 or 4 games. He couldn't play anymore because he'd been ill all week and he was just gone. Luckily, Parker was in goal and don't have to run around as much. But yeah, mate, it's brilliant. It's brilliant.
And also,
I get more emotional and probably more nervous than I did ever playing like that. Watching your kid play.
I'm the opposite. I'm quite like just laid back, just chilled.
Yeah, no, I'm like...
Your boys...
But you've always been horizontal. He's always been horizontal, right?
Yeah. Do you know when you watch DiMaggio play?
Yeah.
He's 23 now, right?
Yeah, this year.
So.
He's 24 this year.
Yeah, talk to me about that experience because we were at the grassroots level watching our boys play, and I must admit, I get nervous and a bit worried. What are you like watching him play?
I'm so chill, just like I'm just relaxed. I just sit there. Normally, like the first proper game I went to, what he played went on loan to Blackburn.
Yeah,
they played against Arsenal. And it was at Ewood Park, and I obviously went all the way up, went to the game.
Yeah.
And he actually scored.
Oh,
like everybody like jumped up.
Yeah.
I just got up all calm and just like.
Really?
Yeah, it's just always like.
See, I'm like that. When we've done something well, I'm very calm. But it was the final. I did cheer more.
Really?
A lot. Yeah, but mate.
It's just, I don't know, it's just a habit. Same when I go and see my other.
But secretly inside, you're buzzing. You're buzzing.
Inside,
celebration.
Mad buzzing,
yeah.
Do you know, it's different. I remember chatting to Ida about it, because all 3 of Ida's boys are professionals, aren't they, like, doing their thing. And he was like, I said, it must be great, mate. He's like, it's stressful, like, you're worried about him getting injured, or like, he says on a Saturday night he left phone calls and one of them would be happy because he's played well, the other one would ring his dad. I'm saying, I'm not, you know what I mean? I'm like, so that's interesting. But so what have you been up to this week?
Well, apart from on Friday, when we did the podcast, and then had a few errands to run Friday because I was going up to watch the game, the City game, v Brighton game, which was for me was a decent game. Yeah. And just caught up with some co-workers and had a few drinks really, and then tried to make sure I was back down in London to watch the cup final. So
a few drinks for you, straight Hennessy's, right? That's your drink, right?
Yeah.
Straight Hennessy.
Oh no, strong. He's hardcore. Isn't he?
How can you drink that? Like,
I don't know.
It's just your finger.
Just know when. Like it's just not. I know when it's home time.
It's a sipping drink, though, isn't it? It's a sipping drink.
Yeah, but it depends.
It depends how many you had. To be fair, we've had some good nights out as a trio, I reckon, along our time together.
More to come.
Yeah,
we ain't done yet.
Yeah.
Do you know what
me and you've had quite a few together, to be fair. Always led me astray.
Do you know what he does me, right?
He led me astray as well, actually.
No. Do you know what he does me, right? He goes, if I say, he says, you're coming out, I go, I can't come back, go that. And he go, have you worked out, like, the average age people die is like 75, so we've only got like 35 summers left.
I worked out over the next 10 years.
He's got a graph.
Over the next 10 years, if we only went out once a month, that ain't a lot, mate.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? 120 nights
he got
left.
Proper in depth. He's like, the last 10, 15 years, you're not going to be really like...
good nights.
You're going to be struggling. You might be... And he's like, I'll go, all right, geez, I'll come then.
Well, the best thing about poker at the weekend...
My mum's still going out now, so we've got plenty of time.
Good.
Oh, yeah.
Good.
Maybe we've got 200 nights if we go out once a month. Oh, actually, at poker at the weekend, it was like, when people were going out...
Yeah.
I didn't want anyone to go home, so I just kept buying them back in. I ended up clearing up. I brought him back in 3 times.
It was good. I felt for Frank because we was in the garden playing poker and everyone kept going into the main house like to get fabs. Like for some reason, everyone's on fabs.
My miss going, wild night out. Everyone's having a fab ice cream. It was Carl that brought them. My Welsh mate Carl, who's been talked about a bit on this pod before, but he brought them.
Yeah, they went down well, the fabs.
They did, to be fair. They disappeared. They disappeared.
Should we get onto a bit of football?
Final. Well, I didn't see it, obviously, because I was down watching. I see the highlights. The only place to start. I mean, you couldn't. I was driving through London at 8 in the morning, and there was Geordies everywhere.
When I came back to Manchester.
Do you know what I mean?
First trophy in 70 years, isn't it?
Yeah.
First trophy in 70 years. That's like, if you're alive and you've seen Newcastle win a trophy, you've got to be 75 plus to remember it. That's like, there's none of them. None of these lads have seen their team win a trophy. So it was full of emotion.
Dan Burn getting a goal, Newcastle boys,
like,
call up to England, mate.
Sometimes you think in life, you think to yourself, there must be a plan from higher something else, because for them, a Newcastle lad who's found himself there, he's gone round the houses, gone lower leagues, gone into Brighton, he's a proper Geordie boy. Yeah. His first call up for England at 32, and he's playing a cup final, and he scores the pivotal goal. Do you know what I mean? It's like, football that's why we love football. It just brings up these fairy tales all the time, and even the most hardened Liverpool fans could be forgiven. They must have had something in their heart just going, all right, we've had our, we've won trophies, and we're going to win trophies, but if we're going to lose to anyone, it would have to be to Newcastle, wouldn't it? What do you think of that, Ray?
Newcastle just bullied them.
Yeah,
I thought they were the best team all over the park, every area. Something I thought they deserved. A few people asked me, I've got a few friends that are Liverpool fans, and I said to them before, like a few weeks ago, I said, I think Newcastle can beat you. And the first thing they said, no chance.
I think as well, coming off that, the week they've just had as well with PSG, it's been a tough week, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's obviously played a little bit.
One thing you found out yesterday as well is
true.
Liverpool don't like direct football. They couldn't deal with it. because it was bypassing that midfield every time they tried to go forward. It just came straight back. Their players all over the place.
But
Salah was kept quiet.
Yeah, they played that really well, though, didn't they? I thought they were aggressive.
I'm going to ask you about that, like the direct style of play, because Eddie Howe come out after the game publicly and was saying that they played them, they kept their powder dry, I think is the expression he used, which means they played Liverpool 3 weeks ago, and all of their set pieces that they've been working on, the tactics of how they're going to play Newcastle in the final, they didn't do that day. And Liverpool sort of won a comfortable game 2-0. Yeah. I mean, how much of that Eddie Howe's tactics in the game was the decisive factor, do you think?
Spot on.
Yeah.
Yeah, massively. I think he won that battle from the first 10 minutes. And I think what set the stall out as well. Remember when we used to play back in the day and the keepers coming out 20 yards outside his box to take a free kick and kind of just lump it into the corner? You could see they couldn't deal with it because it put Konate in a lot of problems. Kwanzaa had to deal with that as well as normal wing play, which he's not used to playing out there. And it put Virgil in awkward positions because people were getting caught out, getting stuck under the ball. He's having to cover. And there was just, I found there was space everywhere. And it's probably the worst game I've seen Gravenberch played. And that's just because Joe Linton, Tonali and Bruno was so good in that midfield. They were aggressive. They kicked them. They just didn't let them settle. They just didn't let them settle.
Well,
and they can play football on top of it. So as well as playing direct, if they need to hold the ball, they did that.
Yeah, talking about the PSG game where they had the midfield of Vitinha, João Neves and Ruiz, and in Newcastle with Bruno, Tonali and Joe Linton, that's three imposing midfields, and they've lost them 2 battles in there, both games, didn't they? But Bridgie, what do you think about Van Dijk and Konate dealing with the long balls? Do you think the modern footballer, because it's, when it
doesn't happen as much,
doesn't happen as much? I'm just thinking, when we played, there were so many teams. I'm thinking your Boltons, your Blackburns, your Evertons, your Stokes. There's at least 5 or 6, 7 teams that you knew that was coming, so you had to find a way of dealing with it. They don't deal with it as much.
They did it a lot.
Yeah.
But other teams did it as well, but maybe not as much. So even when I was at Southampton, I met, kick-off. It was always knock it back.
In the corner.
Smash it up over the fullback's head, the smallest fullback, and get on the end of it. And sometimes if there was nothing on, that clipping behind for someone to run onto.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
It's a great one. I think now you're seeing some goals that are coming from everyone trying to play too much. And it's getting that right, and it's hard. And I think that ball in behind, especially if you've got a striker or a winger that can run onto it.
Yeah.
And Newcastle got 3 of those. Murphy, Isaac and Barnes that played yesterday.
Runners.
They go in behind. And you know as a defender, that's the worst run, when attackers keep stretching the game.
A bit more pressure, isn't it? You're under pressure to deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked about that Friday, about running as a winger, running without the ball. I mean, I wasn't a winger. I didn't play wing until I went to Chelsea at 2022. That season, I was playing midfield before, with first year with Richie, like 4-4-2, wasn't it? Yeah. So, and I had to learn them runs in behind, but that was the difference, wasn't it? Newcastle had beautiful timing on the runs, getting in behind.
Massive difference, I think. Like, Salah didn't get much play. They didn't even give their midfield time to get their head up and play those raking passes. And I just felt Liverpool couldn't deal with it. And then you could see it another way as well. They didn't even look like, if that ain't working, all right, we're going to do this. They just stuck to it. And that's where Eddie was clever. He says, right, you know how we play this way, but can you deal with how we play that way? And they couldn't deal with it.
Yeah, it's true.
So I've brought this up a couple of times, but just quickly, yellow cards and how easy they are to get now.
Yeah.
A winger like you, as I said, an old school winger, you give them the ball and get at the fullback. Well, mate, they could end up being so many more sendings off. I don't think you see as much as that anymore, where it goes wide, you get the ball, get at the fullback.
It's starting to slowly come back in terms of like the wingers that are in play now rather than, you say, 3 years ago. There's a lot more wingers now that are trying to make things happen at another thing. I think City's got a few like that. Obviously, you've got Brighton's got a load like that.
Yeah.
Liverpool in spells with Diaz is quite like that. Salah, if you class him as a winger. So they are there. I think it's just more the way teams play.
Yeah.
Like City have been working on, from what I've seen in games, like they're trying to isolate Doku so he's one-on-one. So they'll play nice football. It might go to him, it'll come out, it'll go back the other side, but then they'll play a long diagonal back to him when he is in the space to try and make things happen.
Yeah. I just want to quick give a shout out to Eddie Howe and Jason Tindall and that, because you know, we've talked about young English coaches. Stevie's gone out to Saudi, and Frank's doing really well now. Eddie's at the top of that list, isn't he, really? Like, but do you know it's been 17 years since an English manager has won a trophy.
Harry Redknapp, right?
Harry Redknapp. I mean, it's incredible, and it's something that we need to put right, and it's something that we need to with the FA. I think that I've been.
His name's been touted for the England job before, isn't it?
Yeah,
Eddie. Yeah. But you know, it can't just be Eddie Howe. There has to be more. And Frank's coming back up now, and we've got Scotty Parker, and we've got Ashley Cole. Desperate for a job. Listen, he's with England, he's doing that. But listen, at some point when he's finished with England, he's going to want to do it himself and have a go, I'm sure. So, I mean, it's just something that we need to get going, like, because 17 years, and it's like that blew my mind. What do you think of that, Bridgie?
It's just crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I've always said, as an England team, we should have an England manager, and so you're going to have to give English coaches, managers a chance, aren't you?
God. It's because there's so much money in the game. People just want the best of what's already out there doing well, because it's too risky.
I also think
to
if you
give
can
a
have,
chance.
like with Ash, he obviously loves the game. Like we spoke about before, how much he studies. You know, he's like when you were away with him, he had his laptop out and everything, and he's studying. If you go for a manager that is more established, it don't always work, does it? And then the sacking, it costs you a fortune. You take Ashford, he might not be in as much money, but the deal might not be as big. The risk ain't as big a little bit, but you'll know you're getting someone who knows the game. I think it'd be great for a club to take a chance on someone.
I'm praying they start taking a chance on English managers, because like, what is there, 2 in the league?
Yeah,
it's only 2 in the Premier League.
It's unacceptable, isn't it?
It's not good enough.
Like, listen, that brings us on to Thomas Tuchel's England squad, which has raised a few eyebrows. Listen, your eyes are drawn straight away to Jordan Henderson coming back. I just want what do you make of that?
Look, I think he's a fantastic player and had a fantastic career, but I just think sometimes it's time for change. He hasn't been in a squad for a while. I think Wharton, it has been unbelievable before he got injured and since he's come back from the injury. So I didn't understand how that call-up came before, that sort of thing. But everybody in football has their own opinion. And just as we're sitting there's most probably other managers and coaches saying the exact same thing we're saying, that how the squad is. You can't really please everyone. So
why do you think the main reason is in there? Just because you've been playing well?
Leadership.
Leadership.
Leadership. My thing with Thomas Tuchel, because first of all, I think Thomas Tuchel's a fantastic manager, and he was brilliant when he was at Chelsea, and I was in and around doing a bit of the ambassador stuff for the club. He was brilliant with me. You could see as soon as I met him, I could tell why he's top drawer. He was personable. He looked like the lads had the lads eating at the palm of his hand. So he's top, right? You know, forget the fact that, you know, the FA they've gone backtracked on themselves and gone, we're never going to go with a non-English manager. Now we've got a German manager, right? That's going to be a problem. Not a problem, but that's going to be something which will always rear its ugly head every time. The press will use that to beat him with and beat England every time there's a bad result. But forget that. I look at this squad, and what I see physicality, which is what I saw in the. I'm just going to run you through like the midfield: Bellingham 6'2", Eze 6 foot, Jordan Henderson 6'1", Curtis Jones he's 6 foot, Declan Rice 6 foot, Morgan Rogers 6. That's it. The midfield's huge, right? Bowen and the forwards of pace and aggression. Bowen, Gordon, pace. Foden's quick. Rashford's coming back in, he's quick. Solanke can move. You know, the only one there who you wouldn't say is a flying machine is Harry Kane, and he's Harry Kane. Kyle Walker's still in the back. Quansah's a big lad. Liverment, Miles Lewis, physicality. So I think he's looked at it, and I think he's gone, right, I've got 18 months to go, right? Which is an absurd contract to give an England manager, right? You think to yourself, right, an England manager should be on a long contract, and it should be a steady, like 3-4 squads where you go, right, because there's a little bit of trying to win the tournament, and there's a little bit of trying to win the tournament after that. So you bring players in. He's gone, these players are going to, in 18 months' time, he's gone, he's gone, these players are going to win me the World Cup, and that's the only thing that's going to keep my job. So I don't understand the mindset behind that. And he's just gone for what he knows. He's going to be we're going to be a team that's going to play powerful, physical, almost German-like football. Yeah. That's my opinion on the whole England squad.
If that wins us the World Cup, we take it, no?
Yeah, I'll be getting my lederhosens on. Thank the Germans. I'll be right.
There you go.
You know what I mean?
I get that feeling, do you know, because there's so many people against the squad and a bit surprised that.
Yeah.
Just think he's going to end up just doing well.
You know, he's always been, as a manager, defensively sound.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing, because we have the attackers to unlock pretty much any door they need to. It's just whether he can get them both linked up together and working well together, and I think England will be fine, man.
Yeah, I mean, do you know what was... Listen, is there anyone in that squad, Bridgie, that jumps out at you that you think you're either buzzing for or you're...
You know what I'm buzzing for?
Go on.
And a lot of people aren't.
Go on.
Is Marcus Rashford.
Yeah.
And it's just because I really like him as a player. And there's going to be some people saying he hasn't done enough since moving, but you can just see the difference in him. And I'd love for him to just get on that pitch and just be flying. Because he's a dangerous player, mate.
Yeah.
He's a dangerous player.
You as a fullback, you know you wouldn't want to mark him, would you?
No,
you wouldn't want to mark him.
Those quick players, they're just always dangerous. When you've always got to stay switched on. It's a cat and mouse like that, innit? It's like if I give him too much space, mate, it's just dangerous. Just he's past you and he's gone. And I think that's
Gibbs White's another one, isn't it?
Yeah. Gibbs White's. What do you make of him? Because I think he's mustard.
He's unbelievable.
He's been unlucky, and
he is unbelievable. He does everything for somebody that you would so-called call a flair player.
Yeah.
He gets stuck in.
Yeah.
He does the dirty side of the game well and still has the energy and finesse to pick out the right passes. And I think he's brilliant.
He's an old school midfielder. Like he's doing what he's playing as, like, if people say he's a number 10. The work he does off the ball.
It's scary, mate.
When I was playing midfield, like that was the standard.
Base,
you had to do that like before you'd even be considered to even see the ball. But he's doing it, and I credit his manager as well for helping him develop him. You know, sometimes
Watkins, is he injured?
Good question. I think he's been in and out, isn't he? He's not.
Right. He's not injured.
He's not injured.
No. I think that's harsh.
That's harsh. Yeah.
I don't know. He's competing against what, Kane? So his likelihood is he isn't going to start anyway.
Right.
And I don't think Ollie this year has been the Ollie of last season in terms of he's not taking the chances he was taking last year. Now, I think he's a great player.
Yeah.
But I think when it comes to England squads, we've all been there.
Yeah.
If you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, you get left out.
Yeah.
You would take Solanke over Watkins as well.
No, because he's just come back fit as well. I don't think I think he's played one game.
Yeah.
And that was a game on the weekend. So even that's a tough one as well.
Yeah. What do you make for his sort of, not his dip in form, Watkins, but he's just coming off of his levels? Do you think it's because I personally think, you know, do you remember the rumours of the Arsenal move late, and for a kid from that sort of, you know, I think he's a North London. He's an Arsenal. He's an Arsenal. You know, he's an Arsenal fan. You know, and he's at that age where that's his last opportunity to go there. I mean, I personally think the Villa and Arsenal at the moment, there's not much in it. They're both in the last 8 of the Champions League.
Yeah.
Arsenal are ahead of them, but you know, there's exciting things happening at Villa as well. But I think personally, and it happens to all players. You know, there's an enormous sniff of you leaving. And then it doesn't happen for whatever reason, which I think was a bit cheeky by Arsenal as well. I think it was a bid to appease their fans. Like, look, we're trying type thing. Do you know what I mean? So I think he's just turned, and he should just, and this will be a little kick in the balls for him to think,
I need to deflate him,
I need to finish this season well. But there's lots of exciting things to go on.
Did you see the Dele Alli sending off at the weekend?
Yeah.
I've seen the pictures. That's about it.
Mate.
I had to rewatch it a few times. I was like, oh.
What?
At first, I was like, what's going on there? It's not that bad. Then you watch it again, you're like, I thought, what's going on? What's he thinking?
Didn't he say that he just tried to
tried to clip his heel? But then I thought to myself, why would you do that though?
Yeah. But the thing is, if you ain't played football for 2 years like him, you've got to give him a bit of a
breathing space.
Yeah, you have. I was gutted because I've just been rooting for him to do well when he's gone through.
We all been rooting about him. I mean, what do you? Because we all know the whole of this country. One thing we do like in this country is we like to kick when they're up there. We like to kick them down, but we also, when somebody opens up like he has, I think everyone, is. Talk about his troubled youth would have wanted him to do well at the weekend. Is that because that's what I personally?
Oh no, definitely 100%.
Yeah,
I just took the positives out of it.
Yeah,
he's on the pitch. He made an appearance. And there's something for him to build from now.
I think he still have a chance with.
There's something for him to build from now.
Yeah,
yeah. I mean,
just learn from it.
And well, listen, what worse? And Colton's in Como now, so we can comfort.
He'll be putting his arm around having a right chat with him, he will.
Yeah.
That'd do in the world of good, that will.
Delhi,
come on, Colton.
Delhi, if you're listening, stay away from the big man and Lake Como.
No,
he'll look after you.
Yeah, he'll look after him, definitely.
100%. Listen, this game frustrated the life out of me, the Arsenal-Chelsea game, 1-0. Because... I covered Chelsea Thursday night in Copenhagen, and they just made hard work of it. It changed. I feel for Enzo because Jackson's out the side, and I know your dad's a big fan of Jackson. He's been rooting for him, like the whole time. But he's become a better player because everyone who gets into that position for Chelsea, and that just hasn't, like Nkunku hasn't taken his opportunity.
Yeah.
Neto's a winger, he's a great player, but he's not a centre forward. And that's what it looked like. Arsenal won the game. Marino's first half header from an Odegaard's corner, another set piece. It's 51 match drought for Arsenal in scoring from corners from their 15th corner goal of the season. Chelsea struggles. I think Righty, I think it's that centre forward position. Both teams, but Chelsea without Jackson just look toothless.
Yeah, I can most definitely agree. Even before Cole Palmer gets injured, I think since Cole Palmer there was a spell that he made something like 44 chances and only one assist come off that. Yeah. So it tells you what they are lacking in those areas. But then also, if Jackson isn't playing when Cole's playing, it feels like Cole doesn't influence the game as well as he has as well, because that's one of his players he always looks for to stretch the game and open the game up. So it's been a difficult time. But even, Joe, you speak about like the attack. I just think the defence, man, like against Arsenal, looks so bad. Like there's no leaders. I think I would have kept Thiago. Because if there's anybody those centre-backs can learn from, he's the best person for that to happen.
Yeah. That's a fair point. You think they lack a bit of experience as well? This whole squad,
Yeah, I do. The whole squad. I know we've talked about Arsenal as well, like having and getting a striker, but that doesn't complete them, does it? When I look at them, I don't think.
They look miles off it as
well. I don't think that completes them. I think they're far off Liverpool. When you look at them now, I don't think a striker makes them like that's it now. I don't think it does.
I had the exact same conversation with some friends.
Really?
And I just use City as an example.
Really?
City got Haaland. He scored 20 plus goals. They're still sitting fourth.
True. So it's not the answer.
Strikers, it hasn't been the answer for them 2 years when they finished second before this time, because you still need other people to score goals and to play well.
Not many of them just look solid, do they?
Yeah.
They look solid or...
Yeah, look for them little moments. When you're looking at Chelsea as a defensive unit, look for the moments where the ball's gone into the forward and there's not enough winning of the duels, like dominating. And then on the second balls, there's not enough that in that area. They do look a bit fragile. And they're young, so they can develop. And they can get better, but they would be better with an experienced player playing next to them. I want to quickly ask you, right, about, because I did the Arsenal game on Wednesday, and Raheem played, and he set up 2 goals, and he come over to the desk to talk to us. And I know Raheem from Liverpool, and he's such a great lad. And what a fantastic career he's done. Listen, if he finishes tomorrow, he's done enough in football. He's done absolutely brilliant. I mean, what do you make of first of all, him? What's happening with him at Arsenal, and can you see? Do you think he can turn it round, or do you think there's?
Yeah, he can definitely turn it round.
Yeah,
I think there's so much difference in all three teams, City, Chelsea and Arsenal, the way they all play. I think when he was at City, he had places where he needed to be, like when Kevin put the ball in the box, he was always in the areas to tap the ball in. He's kind of, when he's signed now for Arsenal, he's kind of gone back to how it used to be when he was at Liverpool, where he had to create a lot more individually, and for not dribbling all the time for 3-4 years. It's only normal you're going to be a little bit rusty.
But do you ever find it difficult when you're changing teams?
Oh God,
It's hard, isn't it? That's what I mean. It's really hard.
When I came to meet you guys at Chelsea, like, we played football completely different. Before it was like, give the ball to Shaw. Wherever he is on the pitch, he's going to get the ball. He's going to run all the way out there. I come to Chelsea, I don't need to be all the way back there because I've got players that are going to give me the ball. So then I had to figure out, right, this defender is way closer to me than he normally is. So that's when I had to start learning to play in the pockets. And people always used to say to me, you don't play the same way. I said, if anything, my football IQ's got a lot better since joining Chelsea, because now I've realised I don't have to do it all on my own.
It's difficult. Like, imagine being a foreigner as well and changing, and people just expecting you to like just do what you were doing there. It's just so different.
Yeah, it is. And it can tweak. It's interesting you say that, because I remember when I went to Liverpool under Roy, and I've gone from Chelsea, Carlo Ancelotti, and it was like, you're popping it. I'm rolling into pockets. I'm starting in a 10 yards further up the pitch. With most of the time we had possession of the ball. If I come in, people, and then Roy, it was back to what I was doing at under 15s for England, 4-4-2, shuffling across. And I'm like, mate, I ain't quick enough or powerful enough anymore to do that. And then he wanted me to run 20 yards up the pitch and then dribble past someone. My legs would go in a little bit, but I just found it so tough. Do you know what I mean? So Raheem's leaving that Manchester City thing, we were so entrenched with everything they were doing, come to Chelsea, which was a mess when he walked into the door.
And he did well at the start.
Yeah, he did all right, man. He did, because he's a top player. But then again to Arsenal under a different style. So it is. So you got to give. It's hard to adjust for Raheem. It is.
From the White House to Gaza, Kiev to Beijing, elections, economics and the environment compete with conflicts and other complex issues for our attention. In an age of fake news, deep fake and artificial intelligence,
they've got to have a vote and a say.
It's important to look beyond the loudest voice to understand the truth. From newsmakers to groundbreakers,
my campaign is going very well.
Presidents, prime ministers, princes and peacemakers, and cultural tastemakers.
As Arabs, as Middle Eastern, we're too emotional.
Join me on the Riz Khan Show for empowering conversation.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome, of course, to the Saudi House. Today, we're going to be talking about climate change, Saudi Arabia in particular, their contributions to addressing global environmental challenges. His Excellency Adel Al-Jubeir is here with me. Your Excellency, it's wonderful to see you as always.
It was a pleasure.
I want to kick off, though, by asking you about what we've seen in just the last 48 hours. U.S. President Donald Trump signing a raft of executive agreements and pledging to withdraw from the Paris Accords. In your mind, does that damage the world's ability to fight climate change?
I don't believe so. I think there are different ways of achieving the objective that we all want, and countries can pursue whatever path they believe is best for them. I think the important thing is the bottom line. The Trump administration in the first term actually did a lot to reduce carbon in the United States. So this is a very positive development. I think the important thing is that we look at these discussions as cooperative discussions, not as negotiations, because we're all trying to find the most optimum path forward to dealing with the challenges in a way that's unemotional, that's logical, that's scientific, so that we can overcome this challenge that we have. We're all in this together. There are no winners or losers. We all win or we all lose. That's the attitude that we in Saudi Arabia bring to this discussion.
Just 2 years ago here at the World Economic Forum, Al Gore described what was happening in climate as boiling oceans and rain bombs. A lot of people pushed back on that at the time privately, but they didn't necessarily feel comfortable doing so on a public stage. In your mind, how are these words changing when we describe climate?
We have a challenge that is before us with regard to climate change and with global warming. Nobody can dispute that, and the impact that it has on not only our climate but on our politics, on conflicts, on not in dispute. I think what we need to adopt is a rational, scientifically based conversation, not grandstanding and not threatening, because it will be like the shepherds who cried wolf too many times and then nobody believed them. We know we have a problem. We know we have a challenge. So now that we know this, let's not talk about how it's going to kill all of us. Let's talk about how we extricate ourselves from this problem. We can do it by education. We can do it by more rational policies. We can do it by more efficient production of energy. We can do it by more efficient use of energy. We can do it by investing in alternative sources of energy. We can use it by combating desertification, by land restoration. We can use it by funding research to experiment with transformative technologies. And we are in Saudi Arabia doing all of this. We are setting aside 30% of our territory, land as well as sea, to be protected areas so that they're untouched. We are investing in greening. We are investing in transforming waste into energy. We are investing in solar, in hydro, we're looking seriously at nuclear power. We're investing in capturing carbon from the atmosphere. We're investing in a blue economy. We're investing in our seas and sustainable fishing. We are doing all of it because of two reasons. One, we live on this planet. We breathe the same air everybody does, and it's important for us that it's a healthy planet. And two, it's also very profitable. So there's an economic incentive to do this. And we have taken our experience and we expanded it into initiatives like the Middle East Green Initiative, which includes more than 22 countries, to teach countries how to incorporate the circular carbon economy approach so they can deal with environment and climate change issues the way we have been, so that we all benefit in our region. Because, as I said, we all win or we all lose. We are all in this together, and climate and pollution doesn't differentiate between one country and another. That's why the effort has to be regional and it has to be global.
Would you say then perhaps that the election of Donald Trump and his presidency is the great reset that the climate conversation needed?
I hope it would be, because I think everybody is concerned about environment, and everybody is concerned about climate, and it's important that all of us, individuals and nations and companies, do everything we can to deal with this challenge. But we will deal with this challenge. We have the technology, we have the financial resources. We need the political will to engage in a positive, cooperative conversation where we all come up with the best way forward, rather than engage in an emotional, argumentative, political scoring, hypocritical conflict that serves nobody.
Speaking of hypocrisy, over the last several days in the Financial Times, there's been reporting that billions of dollars have fled out of green ETFs and green investing. In your mind, are they jumping the gun there?
I don't know why they pulled out and what investment criteria they have. I do know that in Saudi Arabia, the investments that we have made in renewable energy, in solar, in turning waste into energy, in when we're looking at nuclear, when we're looking at efficiencies, ensuring that we don't have flaring of oil and gas, that we don't have leakages, that those have been extremely profitable. We have huge investments in electric vehicles. We're looking at producing electric batteries. We're looking at storage facilities. And for us, it's been these have been very profitable investments. So we are committed to continuing to invest in this. But in terms of the withdrawal of funds, I don't know what was the reason for them investing in those funds in the first place. I don't know what the returns are, so I'm not in a position to comment on it. But what I can say is it could be a function of people getting excited, wanting to do politically the right thing, and then realizing maybe the funds should have gone somewhere else.
When you think about what Saudi Arabia is doing in this fight against climate change and to make the planet, frankly, a better place, it was interesting. His Royal Highness Prince Abdulaziz just a few days ago during the Future Minerals Forum in Saudi Arabia talked about exporting enriched uranium, yellow cake. That's politically dicey, if you will, as you know. In your mind, how do you explain those kinds of exports to the world?
Very simple. We are a large energy producer in the world. We want to be an exporter of energy to the world, whether that energy is oil or gas, whether that energy is solar, whether that energy is electricity, whether that energy is hydro, whether that energy is nuclear. We want to have a nuclear program in Saudi Arabia to produce energy. We have between 1% and 4%, according to estimates, of the world's uranium deposits in country. It makes a lot of sense to exploit those resources economically by mining it. It makes even more sense that once you mine it, that you engage in the processing to turn the uranium into fuel that you can sell at a higher price. So that includes all of the steps in turning uranium from dirt into energy. And it involves taking advantage of the associated industries that come with this and taking advantage of the profits that come with this. We do not want to be a country where mining companies come in, dig up the soil, remove it, do all the processing and all the refining and all the producing of energy outside. We end up with a hole and we take less than 10% of the value chain. We want to benefit jobs, associated industry, and profits. And we believe that we can do it, as does the International Atomic Energy Agency, in a way that has nothing to do with producing nuclear weapons. Our objective is energy and profit.
Tell me this, speaking of weapons, in the years past, we've often talked about how Saudi Arabia in the 70s and Russia just a few years ago was using energy as a weapon. In your mind, how vulnerable are we today in our energy systems? And I'm talking about whether it be the enormous amount of energy that AI, as we know, is going to require, whether it be just oil markets generally. How vulnerable are we today in our energy markets?
I don't believe, I wouldn't describe it as vulnerable. I would describe it as we are looking at an increase in demand that needs to be filled somehow. Because if it's not filled, then you're going to see a huge spike in prices. And AI and data centers require a lot of energy, and that energy has to come from somewhere. We in Saudi Arabia want to be a hub for these centers. We have the land. We want to be able to, we can produce that energy using renewable energy, solar energy, other energy, and we can do it efficiently. And we believe that given our geographic location, we can have the connectivity to be able to send it abroad. So this is one of the priorities for us. So I think that this is how I would look at it. In terms of oil weaponizing energy, we have maintained for many decades that oil is not a weapon. It's not
anymore.
It's not a weapon. You can't shoot it, you can't fire it, you don't take it to the battlefield. It's a commodity, and it's a precious commodity. It relies on supply and demand, sets the price. We want to be a responsible producer. We have been a swing producer where we try to keep the markets in balance as much as we can to reduce the massive fluctuations in the price of oil, so that it makes it easier for people to invest, to borrow money, and to return their investment, and also to plan long term. That provides stability for the global financial markets, which serves us because we are big investors and we are energy producers, and we want stability in the financial markets.
Yeah. Donald Trump is widely expected to visit Saudi Arabia in the near future. What kind of conversation do you want to have with him regarding energy and climate?
President Trump is most welcome in Saudi Arabia anytime he wants to come. And I think the conversations between Saudi Arabia and the United States, we have been allies, we have been partners for 80 years. We have huge interests, whether it's bilaterally in terms of trade, investment, in terms of cultural exchanges, in terms of students, in terms of whether it's regionally. We work very closely together on bringing peace and stability in a region, maintaining security in a region, whether it's globally, the same issue. We have very important relationships on technology, on energy, on investments. We are large investors in the U.S. economy. American companies are large investors in the Saudi economy. So it is a huge relationship, and it has many, many dimensions to it. And every time our two countries have worked closely together, they have been able to achieve great things, whether in terms of stability and security and peace regionally and globally, and in terms of prosperity for both countries when it comes to trade and investment issues.
There's a lot of speculation about what the U.S.-China relationship will be in the future. Saudi Arabia, of course, has a strong relationship both with the United States and, of course, with Beijing. How worried are you about the possibility that a trade war between the United States and China could derail your agenda as a country?
We have very strong relationships with both countries. Our relationship with the U.S. is a strategic relationship. China is our largest trading partner. We believe that stability in the global financial system and the global market serves everyone. And we hope that the two countries will be able to negotiate their differences, because a trade war does not serve the interests of either. And I believe that we have seen in the past that the two countries have been able to negotiate or resolve their issues and reach understandings through by discussing it rather than by turning it into trade wars.
Talk to me a little bit about the region when it comes to climate. Obviously, we see the UAE made a great deal of strides, obviously hosting COP28. In your mind, as Saudi looks forward to its own hosting of a COP, what are some of the things you're hoping that the region is able to achieve?
Our region, the Gulf region in particular, has done, I think, an outstanding job in terms of dealing with climate, the challenges of climate, as well as land degradation, as well as biodiversity. So the Rio Trio, the three COPs, we have invested tremendous resources in it, beginning with education and all the way to implementation. In Saudi Arabia, we have more than 70 initiatives domestically that deal with all of these issues. We have initiatives globally. I mentioned the Middle East Green Initiative. We established the Global Water Organization. That was an initiative by His Royal Highness the Crown Prince to bring clean water and how we use water more efficiently to as many people as possible. We are part of the Methane Pledge. We are involved with cleaning oceans, and we're involved with reversing pollution of plastics. We are involved in a lot of initiatives, and we have provided investments to many countries around the world to help them with resilience, to help them with beefing up infrastructure, to help them with desalination, to help them with on and on and on. We are doing a lot of things. We hosted COP16, the Earth COP was a land degradation and drought COP, and our objective was to raise the awareness level and highlight the link, the nexus between land degradation and security. If you have land degradation, people don't have food, they move to places where they can plant food. Chances are people live there, you have conflict, you have bloodshed, you have violence, you have extremism, you have terrorism, you have migration. The migrants end up in a country where there could be a reaction that leads to extremist politics. So when you look at extremist politics in Europe, you can trace its linkage to a particular place in Africa or in the Middle East. And you can trace the origins of that conflict to drought. You look at the countries in the Sahel, 90% of the Chad River evaporated since the 1960s. It created dislocations for millions of people who moved, created conflict, and then we're paying the price. Darfur, Sudan has been engaged in a conflict for almost 40 years. And it started with drought, and it turned into a conflict, ethnic conflict, civil war. People are paying the price, and our objective is to highlight this to people, invest early in land restoration, and avoid the consequences that will cost us 50 times more to deal with than if we had dealt with it at the outset. And the irony of all of this is investing $1 in land restoration generates between $7 and $30 in profit. This is better than investing in high tech. Why don't people do it? And this is what we're trying to show people. And this is not an issue, land degradation, that concerns North Africa and the Middle East. Germany has a problem with the waters of the Rhine. Southern Europe has problems with drought. This is an issue that impacts everyone. Sweden gets dust from the Sahara Desert, as does Costa Rica. We get dust from as far away as the Chinese desert. Now we have a lot around us, so this is a global issue, and it's straightforward to deal with. We just need to focus on it and get it done, and this is what we're trying to do in Saudi Arabia.
You may remember President Biden's Secretary of Defense, as well as the current Secretary of Defense in the United Kingdom, have cited climate change as their number one worry for the planet, their number one concern. Now that we have Trump in the White House, is climate your number one concern for the planet?
Ours?
Yeah.
I believe for everybody, the issue of climate change, the issue of whether it's too little water or too much water, the issue of rising temperatures, everybody acknowledges this.
But is it the number one concern facing us?
I think it certainly is. If it's not the number one, it is right up there, because it impacts everything. It impacts, for example, desertification, impacts the reflection of the sun, impacts weather patterns over the Atlantic, impacts the frequency and intensity of hurricanes in the Caribbean, impacts weather climates around the world. Dust can do the same thing. And also the climate issues can impact what happens in the oceans, and the oceans are our biggest reservoir for carbon. And that impacts, again, the rain patterns. And so it's a cycle that impacts everything we do, and it's linked to economic development, it's linked to wars and conflict, it's linked to prosperity. 800 million people on the planet are undernourished. The amount of land we can grow food on shrinks. Populations are rising. So we're heading towards conflict. We have to fix these these issues. And I don't believe that anyone disagrees with this. I believe the differences have to do with what's the right way to move forward in tackling these issues. And I think that grandstanding and emotions and hypocrisy and threats and shaming and naming and finger pointing doesn't get us anywhere. Rolling up our sleeves and planting trees, redesigning our cities, investing in technology, investing in alternative sources of energy, pointing out the benefits and the profitability of that path is what will get people to move towards the right direction. And when we can deal with these issues, they will have a direct positive impact on security, which will then have an impact on stability and peace.
It's interesting, over the last several days leading up to his inauguration, Donald Trump talking about Greenland. I've spent a lot of time in Russia and Ukraine, as you know. And when we talk about climate and what's happening in the Arctic, the ice, surprise, surprise, is melting. That raises security concerns. Russia has the most military intelligence hardware in the Arctic, as well as oil and gas infrastructure, as you know. In your mind, are we living in dangerous times as a result of climate change?
I think we are always living in challenging times. The history, unfortunately, of mankind has been one of wars, not peace and stability. I believe that the conflicts may shift from one region or another depending on the century we live in, but war has been a constant in our history, unfortunately. I think we are moving towards a global society, a global village. I don't want to call it village, it's too big for a village, where we now recognize that something happening on one end of the world has a direct impact on something on the other end of the world, which we never had before. How long did it take to get mail from Europe to the United States 150 years ago? Now it takes a nanosecond to get pictures and voicemail and from the Amazon forest to Siberia because of technology. How long? So now we deal with the issues of that go beyond our borders, that impact all of us positively or negatively. COVID doesn't differentiate between male, female, between Muslim, Jew, Christian, between Asian, African, European. It doesn't differentiate. We are all its target. And unless we all work together to contain it, we can't. And we did work together in spite of our differences. Maybe not ideal, but in a very effective way to contain it and push back against it. So we are, in one hand, yes, business as usual, challenging world, you called it dangerous world, but also business as unusual, which is a recognition that we need to deal with each other to handle global issues like pandemics, like climate, like transportation, and that those issues can only be handled if we work together. So on one hand, you're seeing the world coming together much more closely than before, while at the same time we're the same in the sense of our tensions. And my hope, and I believe this is where we're heading because I'm an optimist, is that as we learn and more, as we learn of the benefits that we get by working together, the side of the side of the equation that spells cooperation grows, and the side of the equation that spells conflict gets diminished. Because where does conflict get us? Nowhere. We can have conflict for 30 years and we'll be worse off than we were when we started. Whereas if we have cooperation, technology, artificial intelligence, trade, in 30 years we can be many, many times wealthier than where we are today. Which vision do you want? Going forwards and upwards, or going backwards and downwards?
Are we, as he says, safer, the world, with Donald Trump in the White House?
I don't see why people talk about this. I think, yes, the world is safer. The world is safer with anyone in the White House. The world is safer because the world is beginning to recognize that we need to work together. We need to deal with challenges that are beyond us as nations or as ethnic groups or as religious groups, and that we have to deal with problems or challenges or dangers as humanity, that we can't escape that. And I believe that we are beginning to do this, and we will continue to do more of this. And so I'm hopeful that our children and grandchildren will be living in a world that is more together and more calm and more prosperous and more healthy than the one we live in.
Your Excellency, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
At Arabiya News, we go beyond the headlines.
From the latest breaking news to in-depth coverage of global events.
We're not bought or sold. Nobody owns us.
The loss of life, the destruction of property. The conflicts are such a terrible thing.
Context and analysis to help you see the full picture.
The world is in a very dangerous place.
Join us on Arabiya News,
It's very impressive.
where knowledge meets perspective.
From the White House to Gaza, Kyiv to Beijing, elections, economics and the environment compete with conflicts and other complex issues for our attention. In an age of fake news, deepfake and artificial intelligence,
They've got to have a vote and a say.
it's important to look beyond the loudest voice to understand the truth. From newsmakers to groundbreakers,
My campaign is going very well.
presidents, prime ministers, princes and peacemakers, and cultural tastemakers.
As Arabs, as Middle Eastern, we're too emotional.
Join me on the Riz Khan Show for empowering conversation.
Hello and welcome to Global News Today, bringing you exclusive interviews with leading experts every weekday here on Al Arabiya News. I'm Tom Burges Watson. Coming up on today's programme, at least 70 more Palestinians are killed in what's been a third successive night of Israeli strikes across Gaza. In just a moment, we'll be asking what's left of the 2-month-old ceasefire deal. European leaders gather in Brussels for a 2-day summit at which support for Ukraine is top of the agenda. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy joined that summit via video conference. Plus, we're going to be speaking to Richard Tice, the deputy leader of the UK's Reform Party, which is gaining traction in the polls and eating into the vote of the main parties. Hello and welcome. Israel says it has resumed ground operations in Gaza after launching more airstrikes during the course of Thursday. Well, hospitals in the enclave are reporting hundreds more casualties. Meanwhile, the Israeli Defense Forces say that troops have moved into the Netzarim corridor, which divides the north and the south of Gaza, and all traffic movement on the main road, north to south, has been banned by Israel. Well, the first wave of airstrikes on Tuesday shattered what's been a 2-month pause in hostilities, and according to the health ministry in Gaza, resulted in the deaths of more than 500 people. Well, 5 UN staff members from the Palestinian refugee agency UNRWA are reported to have been killed in the last few days. That's according to the agency's Commissioner General Philippe Lazzarini. Meanwhile, the British Foreign Minister David Lammy is calling for a, quote, transparent investigation into the airstrike that hit the UN building. Lammy confirmed that 1 UK national was amongst the wounded. Well, yesterday, an Israeli airstrike killed 1 UN worker and injured several others.
Yesterday morning, a UN compound in Gaza was hit. I can confirm to the House that a British national was amongst the wounded. Gaza has been the most dangerous place in the world to be an aid worker. The government calls for a transparent investigation.
Well, let's get more now, and we can speak to Diana Bhutto, who is a human rights lawyer and former Palestinian peace negotiator who joins us from Haifa. Diana, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. You're also a former legal advisor for the Palestinian Liberation Organization. Just want to start by asking you, a lot seems to have been happening on the ground in Gaza during the last few hours. I know you're not there, but what's the latest you're hearing?
I'm hearing that Israel has continued to carry out massive war crimes. We've seen that over the course of the past 50 hours, that Israel has killed more than 700 Palestinians. They've reinvaded the occupied Gaza Strip, dividing it into two. They've bombed a place where there were some UN workers were taking shelter. And there are over 174 children that have been killed. At the same time, we're hearing that the Israelis are not allowing any humanitarian supplies into the Gaza Strip. And so what we're seeing is the worst of humanity met with nothing. There hasn't been any action against Israel, neither by the United States nor by any other country. And so Israel gets to get away with genocide. In fact, they've even just dropped flyers on people in Gaza, telling them that nobody in the world cares about them, that they should flee. And the Israeli foreign minister has similarly come out and said that they aim to go after everybody in Gaza. So this is the situation that we're facing right now.
We did just hear, before we crossed to you, the British Foreign Minister, David Lammy, calling for a transparent investigation into what happened yesterday when that UN building was struck. But just to pick up on what you were saying with regards to the humanitarian aid, I mean, it's been, nearly 3 weeks, hasn't it, since any humanitarian aid has been allowed in. And I'm just wondering, how do people survive? What are you hearing?
I don't think they are surviving, Michael. That's the problem. So the Israelis closed off the crossing point on March the 2nd. And I want to be very clear here. This isn't Israel that's providing aid. This is the world that's providing aid. And Israel is simply not allowing it in. And so since March the 2nd, Israel hasn't allowed in any aid whatsoever, which means that there's no fuel, there's no electricity, there's no places to get clean water, and there's no food. People are reporting mass malnutrition, particularly amongst children. And as you know, after 18 months, or nearly 18 months of genocide, in which Israel has been targeting virtually every hospital, you can see that the healthcare system is also dilapidated. So we're seeing that in addition to the numbers of people that Israel is directly targeting and killing through its bombs, that others are dying as well because they're not simply able to get the aid that the international world, that the world has sent to Gaza, but that Israel is preventing from getting in.
Yeah, we understand that the death toll now stands at approximately 49,000 since the war began. Just want to ask you, I mean, there's a deal.
That excludes, I just want to make sure that that's clear. You know, the 49,000 is the numbers of people that have been able to be buried. There are over 12,000 Palestinians who are still underneath the rubble. And so we're looking at a death toll that's well over 60,000. It's just that people haven't been able to physically be buried. This is the problem, is that the world has treated Palestinians as though somehow they're disposable, that it's okay for world leaders to express statements that they want to get rid of Palestinians, that it's okay for them to actually starve Palestinians, that it's okay to cut off fuel and food supplies, and that it's okay to bomb children. And so here's the shocking part, is that it's the height of dehumanization when we see all of this happening. And Israeli leaders are able to pick up the phone and speak to world leaders. They're able to travel around the world, despite the fact that there are arrest warrants that have been issued against Netanyahu and against the former defense minister, Yoav Gallant. Here's the problem, is that unless we get to a place where it's not just statistics, but that Israel's being held to account and pays a price, then I'm afraid that we're just going to see this over and over again. And it's not just about Palestinians, but it's about people around the world who are going to become excess and that are simply disposable.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about this later in the interview, but since you bring it up, I mean, are we looking at a scenario in which people in Gaza are basically left with no choice but to try and leave? Given that, you know, there's nowhere safe in Gaza is what we're being told every time we speak to UN officials. They say this to us, nowhere is safe. And, you know, lurking in the back of everybody's minds is this Riviera of the Middle East going to become a reality? I mean, do you think that's where we're heading?
The Israelis made it clear within the first few weeks of the genocide that they wanted to see the Gaza Strip smaller in size and thinner in population. These are the words of the Israeli prime minister. Put it in a different context, it means ethnic cleansing. And this is the plan that they have been put into place since October of 2023, ethnic cleansing and genocide. It's gotten to the point now where if you look at the Gaza Strip, anybody who's been there can tell you that they're now double and triple bombing the exact same sites. 90% of all of the buildings in the Gaza Strip have been bombed. All of the hospitals have been bombed. Israel has created a scenario where the Gaza Strip is no longer livable so that it can affect its policies of ethnic cleansing and of genocide. And so rather than us looking and saying, where is it that people should be going, we should be doing the opposite and demanding that Israel stop. And not only demanding that Israel stop, but force Israel to pay a price. And I think there's another issue here as well. When people talk about people leaving the Gaza Strip, it's important to keep in mind that 80% of the residents of the are right on the other side of the border. If anything, they should be allowed to return back to their homes that they were ethnically cleansed from in 1948. And so rather than us trying to come up with scenarios to adapt to Israel's war crimes, we should be coming up with ways in which to challenge Israel's war crimes and to hold Israel to account.
Well, they are challenged. And yesterday there was condemnation from many countries you can think of with regards to the renewed bombing campaign, with regards to that UN hospital. And yet, you know, those words don't seem to change very much, do they? I mean, nothing changes from one day to the next.
No, and it's not even just condemnations, Michael. It's important to keep in mind that we've had condemnations, we've had a few decisions from the International Court of Justice, one of which is calling upon the world to make sure that they prevent genocide. We've had a case from the International Court of Justice saying that the occupation has to come to an end. We have criminal indictments that have been issued against Netanyahu and Gallant. And if this international system can't work, then the question becomes, what's the utility of it? Why do we keep talking about having a system of norms and laws when we can't seem to hold one country to account? And so, yes, the condemnations are important and all these cases are important. But what's even more important is to stop Israel and to make sure that Israel doesn't get away with genocide, that doesn't get away with ethnic cleansing a second time.
I mean, people watching will be saying to themselves, hang on, there was a deal, a ceasefire deal that took months to broker. It involved 2 US administrations. Lots of other countries were involved as well. I mean, are we looking at a situation in which that deal has effectively now just been shredded and it no longer has any validity?
Yes. This is exactly what we're looking at. So immediately after this deal was signed, Prime Minister Netanyahu made it clear that he was not happy with this deal. He ended up losing members of his cabinet as a result of this agreement. And it was clear that all he wanted was to be able to get some of the Israeli captives released, but that he had no intention of changing the situation for Palestinians in Gaza in any way, shape, or form. When he then went to the United States, he then pressed President Trump to revise the agreement. And this is why we're now seeing that the U.S. has backed down from the very agreement that they have brokered. It's come to the place where President Trump is acting the exact same way as President Biden had acted, arming Israel, letting Israel get away with genocide, and doing whatever it is that it wants to do. What Netanyahu now wants to do is it wants to make sure that it has the ability to continue to bomb Gaza And it wants to continue to blame Palestinians for bombing Gaza. And so one of the things that is the most disheartening in all of this is that we had guarantors of this agreement, the United States being one of them, Qatar, Egypt. And these three countries have not stepped up. Qatar has been trying to put pressure, but the number one country that can and should be stopping Israel is the United States, whether it's stopping Israel by picking up the phone and telling them to stop, or whether it's stopping Israel by stopping those weapons transfers and arming Israel. Either way, the United States has a responsibility. And instead of heeding that responsibility, they've just simply allowed Israel to do what it is that it wants to do.
Okay, I mean, just to sort of sum up in terms of what happens next. I mean, time and time again, we've spoken to people on both sides in this conflict, and an Israeli government spokesperson would say to us, all Hamas needs to do is release the last of the living hostages, return the bodies of those who are no longer alive, and the bombing will stop. Do you see Hamas heeding that call for the sake of the Gazan people who will otherwise endure potentially many more months of bombardment?
The Israelis have had this option on the table back in October of 2023. And one of the things that Hamas made very clear was that they wanted to release the Palestinians who are being held captive in Israeli jails. These are up to 10,000 Palestinians. The fact that the only way that Palestinians can ever be released from Israeli prisons, from Israeli dungeons, is to have some sort of a prisoner exchange, shows you just how perverse it is that Palestinians have had to negotiate for their freedom. I think that instead of putting pressure and focusing on Hamas and prioritizing Israeli lives, I think in the aftermath of a genocide in which Israel has killed 60,000 Palestinians that we know of, decimated the Gaza Strip completely, I think it's time to prioritize Palestinian lives. And I think it's time for us to be saying, enough is enough. Israel must stop. And Israel not only must stop, but it must pay a price. Unless that step is taken, then I'm afraid we're going to be seeing an even worsening situation. The onus is not on Hamas. Hamas is not the one that's committing the war crimes. It's Israel that's committing the war crimes. And we really need to start putting the blame where blame belongs, and that's on Israel.
And just lastly, I mean, were there world leaders listening or watching this program? What would be your appeal to them, Diana?
Just finally put sanctions on Israel to not let Israel have a pass. Israel's been allowed to get away with murder. It's been allowed to get away with genocide. It's been allowed to get away with committing war crimes. And nothing has changed for Palestinians. In fact, it's quite the opposite. We still see countries that are doing business with Israel and arming Israel. We have these international decisions that make it clear that no country should be doing any business whatsoever with Israel. No country should be providing Israel with weapons. They've proven that they just use them for genocide. And so if anything, we should be at a place where Israel is ostracized because it deserves to be ostracized. It's a rogue state and must be held to account.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. Diana Butto, thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure.
Now, it has been another busy day of diplomacy and talks regarding the future of Ukraine and a possible ceasefire. Well, fresh from a telephone call with President Trump, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has briefed EU leaders. He's also been meeting with the Prime Minister of Norway in Oslo. Well, two sets of high-level talks have been taking place in Europe today to discuss the ongoing war. EU leaders gathered in Brussels to decide defence and security strategy measures for Ukraine, whilst in London, top military leaders from 20 countries have gathered to discuss the possibility of peacekeeping in Ukraine. Meanwhile, it's been announced that delegations from Russia and the United States will hold talks on a possible Ukrainian peace settlement in Saudi Arabia on Monday. Well, let's get more now. We can speak to Lieutenant General David Leakey, former Director General of the European Union Military Staff. In 1995, sir, you were the UK's military representative at the peace negotiations ending the Bosnian War. You also commanded a brigade, a peace peacekeeping brigade, I should say, during that time as well. Thank you for taking the time to join us from the south of England. The latest we're hearing is that Russia launched more than 170 drones at Ukraine overnight. Ukraine launched more than 130 drones at Russia overnight. I mean, peace looks as elusive as it's ever looked, doesn't it?
It does. Both the facts on the ground, you've just pointed out these attacks that are taking place, and also confrontations on the ground, exchanges of artillery fire and frontline fighting, and also in the political umbrella that hangs over all of this or sits over all of this. President Putin appears to not to have conceded any of his political ambitions for prosecuting this war at all. In fact, most of the conditions he's set down are ones that protect his ability to continue prosecuting the war and deny the Ukrainians the opportunity, the sovereign opportunity, to defend their sovereign territory. So I think the prospects for a peace are quite elusive at the moment and a long way off, and the prospects for a ceasefire also seem to be quite a long way off.
The Kremlin would say, actually, that's not the case. The Kremlin spokesperson is accusing Europe of being, quote, anti-peace, failing to support the Russia-US peace initiatives. They say Europe is militarizing and is pro-war. How do you respond to all of that?
Well, it's one of the conditions that Putin laid down at during his telephone call with President Trump 2 days ago was that there should be a cessation of external or foreign military aid to Ukraine, and that there should be no opportunity for Ukraine to mobilize. That was Putin putting a condition down on Ukraine. What he didn't say was, I will do the same. In other words, there is no mutuality in this. So, for example, Russia is being supplied by North Korea, by Iran, by China, and other countries as well, with military hardware and also with support for military production. And so if there is no mutuality, and Putin is, as I've said, showing all the evidence of simply wanting to defer the ceasefire in order that he can continue to prosecute the war, both in the short and in the long term.
So do you think President Trump should have and could have tried to extract more concessions from President Putin than he managed to do when they spoke on Tuesday night?
I think we need to be cautious about criticizing the individual day-to-day tactics on how to conduct the negotiation and whether and when to extract more concessions or conditions from either side, because these things don't happen quickly. And armchair critics like me or you or others sitting listening to the radio or the television won't know what's going on in the backroom deals. And there'll certainly be more discussions going on between officials, between ambassadors, may even be between the military as well. So I think we should be cautious about criticizing President Trump for insisting on more conditions. What I think we can say is that I don't think Trump made anything like as much progress as he hoped to make during that telephone call. And I think what we can also say is that Putin gave absolutely no concessions at all, and is still holding all his cards, having not declared any, on the table.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at sort of the state of dialogue between Moscow and Washington at this particular moment, and then we'll move on to the diplomacy in Europe surrounding this war. We understand that the Russians and the American delegations are going to be meeting in Riyadh this weekend, probably on Sunday. And I just wonder whether you think Ukraine is a major focus, or whether you think it's really just a sideshow in this dialogue, and whether the dialogue more broadly is really just about mending fences between these two countries.
Well, that's a really good point to make, because ceasefires, whether they're in Gaza and Israel, whether it was in the Balkans with Kosovo and Bosnia, whether it's in Ukraine, Russia, these ceasefires happen at various levels. They happen tactically on the ground, shots stop being fired. They happen in the air, aeroplanes stop bombing. They happen in cyberspace, attacks stop happening. They happen in the political sphere. And all of these constitute the context in which a ceasefire or a peace can be negotiated or agreed. And I think what one can say is that at least the sides are talking. So Ukraine is engaged, the US is engaged, the Russians are engaged. There is some talking. And you could also say that at this early stage of the negotiations, there are some signs of confidence building measures or indications of a willingness to make progress. One of those signs, just to evidence that point, is the exchange of prisoners. I would hastily add the exchange of prisoners the offer that was made by President Putin isn't actually something new or novel or dependent or even a precondition for the ceasefire. These prisoner exchanges have been going on throughout the war. So I don't think we should read too much into that. The other concession I think that you could make was a sort of a diplomatic window dressing, was to encourage ice hockey matches between US and Russian players. I'm afraid to say that I rather cynically regard that as an indication that this will continue to be a frozen conflict. The very mention of ice indicates that this conflict is going to be frozen for some time to come. So I'm not at all confident that they're making great progress, other than the fact that there are meetings taking place, and that at least is something. But it's not, in my view, going to happen quickly. Turning to your other point about the Europeans, the Europeans are backing President Zelenskyy. They're continuing with their rhetoric, saying that they will support President Zelenskyy in Ukraine, both militarily and with other support, financial aid, and so on. And they have to do that, because if they say, well, we're not going to support Ukraine, and if the US says we are not going to support Ukraine in the future, then you're leaving the door wide open for President Putin to say, well, I'll wait until we got a ceasefire and everybody's calmed down, and then I'll just walk in and take the rest of Ukraine and finish the job. Somebody has got to tell President Ukraine, and the Europeans are doing this, that he does not have a free license to go and invade a sovereign country.
Indeed, and we'll have to see, just to clarify what I was saying earlier on. In fact, the Russians and the Americans are meeting in Riyadh on Monday, not on Sunday, as I said. I mean, Europe is essentially getting the message here from Washington that it has to stand on its own 2 feet. It's not a new message. They've heard it in not so many words in the first Trump presidency. Are they up to it?
Not at the moment, no. And the Europeans have acknowledged that. I think everybody has acknowledged. Any dispassionate observer of the Europeans would say that, to a certain extent, the Europeans have depended on the insurance policy, which has been underwritten by the US, both politically and militarily. That is acknowledged. That's a given. Are the Europeans up for it? I think so. When you see with the very strong resolve by, for example, these Scandinavian countries, the Germans, their parliament has authorized a complete and historic change to the country's borrowing rules so that they can invest in rearming and in their defense industry. The European Union has said that it will make available, I think it's 800 billion euros over a period of time. So the Europeans are stepping up to the plate now. It is going to take some time. Developing a defense capability isn't something that happens overnight. That's not to say that Europe's cupboard is bare. There are some very, very significant capabilities in Europe, and they just need to be expanded and built on and made more ready and more sustainable.
The British Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, really central to the diplomatic push for some sort of a solution, a resolution in Ukraine, together with the French President Emmanuel Macron. They're very much behind what's called the coalition of the willing. Do you see the British and the French putting their own troops on the ground in Ukraine in some sort of a peacekeeping capacity? And do you think Russia will eventually come round to the idea that that is an acceptable solution?
The news this morning from the discussions, the military discussions, which have been described as moving to the operational phase of the ceasefire. The news this morning is that the intention is to call this force the multinational force Ukraine. So to distance it from either the European Union or Europeans or NATO or the US. To answer your question specifically, both France and the UK have made a declaration that they are prepared to put their national forces boots on the ground. So they, I'm sure, will do that. I think it's not just boots on the ground. And the emerging indications are that the force would be in probably 3 or 4 different parts. One would be some boots on the ground, not as a peace implementation or peace enforcement or even peacekeeping, but probably as a peace reassurance, as a reassurance force. This is quite common where ceasefires or peace has been negotiated. You can look at many of the conflicts, even, for example, in Cyprus, going back over the last 60 or 70 years, there's been a UN peacekeeping, so-called peacekeeping force there. It couldn't keep the peace if the protagonist decided to restart a war. The same in Bosnia. Even at the moment, if the Bosnian factions wanted to go back to war, the military presence there is a reassurance presence. It's an indication of political will. It's not strong enough to stop or prevent, probably even maybe to deter an outbreak of conflict. So I think what we would see in Ukraine are some boots on the ground as a demonstration of political intent, as a demonstration of reassurance to the people in Ukraine. It would also be a demonstration of reassurance, possibly to the Russians, that the Ukrainians were behaving properly. And there would have to be some transparency. So that's on the ground. In the air, there would need to be some sort of air presence or air cover, once again, to give reassurance that there aren't air incursions or air attacks taking place. And also in the maritime domain, I think freedom of movement in the Black Sea is something that, once again, the maritime dimension, the navies could be there to possibly even to guarantee, but certainly to give reassurance that of the freedom of navigation and to prevent maritime attacks taking place by either side.
Just lastly, we're hearing from President Zelenskyy addressing EU leaders, saying that Russia must stop what he called their unnecessary demands. I mean, clearly the Europeans are active in trying to broker a solution. Do you see the Europeans' diplomatic activity on this front as being complementary to or at odds with the efforts of the Trump administration?
Well, I don't know that I can answer that question accurately or with any authority. What I can say, just from my knowledge of being around Whitehall, Brussels, the international community when these sorts of things are going on, is that the West will want to be mutually supporting in these negotiations and not mutually contradictory or being unhelpful. And I'm sure that's what the diplomats will be trying to achieve, and the politicians will be trying to achieve, to make sure that the West, if for want of a better word, the West presents a united front on this.
OK, well, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. Lieutenant General David Leakey, thank you for your time.
Not at all. Pleasure.
Now, as we know, President Trump entered the political fray, positioning himself as an anti-establishment businessman turned politician with plans to shake things up and challenge decades-old norms in US domestic and foreign policies. But he's by no means alone. Many other countries have or have had leaders in the past decade or so with comparable career paths and manifestos. Well, in the United Kingdom, Nigel Farage is one such party leader. He heads up the Reform Party. And for the benefit of our international audience, he was, of course, one of the key figures in the Leave Europe Brexit team and is perhaps, on a personal level, the closest of any British politician to President Trump. Well, according to the latest opinion polls, the Reform Party appears to be gaining traction, eating into the vote of the main parties. Well, many would say the rise of Reform has been one of the most significant features of British politics during the course of the past year. OK, we're joined now by the Reform Party's Deputy Leader, Richard Tice, who is the MP for Boston and Skegness, and who joined us now from central London. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. We were just talking in the introduction about how there are some parallels to be drawn between people in your party and people in the Trump administration. Your professional background is in real estate. Now, that is a clear parallel with President Trump. But I'd like to ask you what your eureka moment was that told you that your calling wasn't in real estate, it was in politics.
I've always had an interest in current affairs and politics, but I always said to myself, I come from a real estate family and I wanted to get stuck in, hopefully make some money, and then if I had some time to give something back to society, to community, to the country in some way, then that was the plan. And in a sense, all went very well. I ran a big multinational listed property company listed on the London Stock Exchange. I ran that for 4 years. We tripled the share price. And then along came the Brexit referendum. And I guess that was my eureka moment where I felt there was a really important choice for the country. I had a very clear view that we should leave a bureaucratic sort of monster of a quango and be an independent sovereign nation, free to make its own decisions and to essentially sort of embrace the opportunities of the whole world without being sort of kowtowing to people in Brussels. So that was the eureka moment. History moves on. You never quite know how things play out. But that really was a defining moment for me. And as I did that, I left running a big listed, property company because you can't do both. You can't get in politics and run a listed company. But I've maintained a close interest in real estate. I've got some industrial real estate interests. And do you know what? That actually really helps. Keeps your feet on the ground. You understand what's really going on.
Indeed. And I think President Trump would say the same sort of thing, that, real life work experience is something that politicians absolutely should have. Your party leader, Nigel Farage, will probably be quite familiar to a lot of our viewers because he's been on the political scene internationally as well as domestically for quite a long time, the champion of Brexit. And at that time, he led the party UKIP. Now, you were previously chairman of the Brexit Party, now rebranded as the Reform Party, or the deputy leader. Just tell us, for the benefit of our international audience, what does Reform stand for?
Reform actually stands, to be honest, for saving the United Kingdom. We are, as a nation, we're in financial trouble, we're in cultural trouble, and we're in societal trouble. And we believe in the key British values of family, community, country. We believe that we've got to change the nature of our policies in the UK. We've got to cut vast amount of wasteful government spending with a sort of UK equivalent of Doge. We've got to cut daft regulations imposed on us primarily by the EU. That allows us the space to cut taxes, to make work pay and to make risk-taking pay. Many of your listeners and viewers will be entrepreneurs, will be risk takers, business owners, and you've got to make taking risk worth it. And if people feel that it's too much like hard work, it's too difficult, the regulations are too burdensome, the costs are too high, then people will say, I can't be bothered, I'll go somewhere else. And that's the challenge the UK faces. So we think if you do those things, and then if you've got to make the nation work for British citizens. And that means you've got to control your borders, you've got to get your own people enthused and motivating to make work pay. And if you do all of that, then you can make people better off again. And that's what we've lost. We've got no growth in this country. We're flatlining at best. Once you factor in the mass immigration that we've had in recent years, everybody's getting poorer per person, per month, per year. And that's not a happy recipe.
Sure. I mean, just for the benefit, again, of our viewers who might not be familiar with the British political landscape, you're doing well in the polls. Reform doing particularly well amongst the 16 to 24-year-old age bracket. I don't know if you've got any comments on that, what the appeal is. But on the other hand, you have your critics, and the Conservative peer and election expert Lord Hayward says your party is regarded by a lot of people as being racist. I wonder how you respond to criticism like that.
Well, we're leading in the polls, in many polls across the political spectrum. And I think that what tells you is that people are not interested in these sort of juvenile, ridiculous jibes from our political enemies. Look, that's the nature of politics. They're jealous of our success. They're jealous of the fact we have sensible policies. We're just going to deliver by hard work. We're going to work harder than anybody else. We're going to have the best policies, and we're going to have the best candidates at elections. We've got elections, local elections in the UK this May. We've then got elections next May in Wales and Scotland. Our next general election will probably be in 2028 or 9. And look, at the end of the day, we're just going to actually roll our sleeves up, get stuck in, and people don't vote for mainstream parties that make people poorer. And one of the key differentiators between us and the two main political parties in the UK, being Labour and the Conservatives, both of those parties are obsessed with the ludicrous net stupid zero, I call it. Net zero is the greatest act of financial self-harm ever imposed on the British people by the British political establishment class. And we're standing against that. We're saying, we'll scrap it. It's a disaster. It's making people poorer. It's not saving CO2. Not that CO2 is a problem, by the way. CO2 actually is plant food. It's not a poison. And this debate is now raging in the UK, and we're winning it. And I think people like a bit of honesty from some people who've been around the block, who've got a track record of success, tell it as it is. And look, of course, the nature of politics in any democracy, people will disagree. They'll shout and scream and try to smear us. We're above that. Nobody can cancel us. We just crack on.
Here at Al Arabiya, we've spoken to quite a lot of people in the new Trump administration. We've spoken quite extensively to Elon Musk's father on 3 or 4 occasions now. One of the things he said, that we've also heard from his son, is the idea that the Reform Party needs a new leader. And you'll have been perhaps surprised by a tweet that went out in January by Elon Musk saying the Reform Party needs a new leader. Farage doesn't have what it takes. I mean, that's probably not very helpful, is it? Let's have a look. There's the tweet there on your screens. Have things improved, would you say, in terms of ties between your party and Elon Musk?
Well, wouldn't life be boring if we agreed on everything? There'd be nothing to talk about. Look, Mr. Musk is a brilliant entrepreneur. I'm a very happy customer of a number of his fine products, including a Tesla. But on that particular issue, we just don't agree. We think that he was wrong on that. Nigel Farage is the best-known politician, and he will be a great Prime Minister of this country, and I'm convinced, for the reasons I've mentioned just earlier in the interview, that he'll be the next elected Prime Minister. And look, we push on. Of course, they've been in touch since, and you can agree to disagree amicably with people that are your friends. And as I repeat, life would be very dull if we if we all agreed on everything. So, look, we just push on. We are making great progress. We're raising money. Obviously, all political parties need to fundraise. We're raising money from former Conservative donors who've given up on the Tories. And just this week, we announced the defection to our party of 29 locally elected councillors from different parties and from independent parties. And that, again, is just a sign of the progress we are making.
How much contact do you and your party have with the new Trump administration? And just let us know, have you met Elon Musk or President Trump?
No, Nigel Farage, our leader, has been driving all of those relationships, and obviously he's in regular touch with various parts of the Trump administration. Now they're in office, moving at extreme pace. There's lots of lessons we can learn. I just touched on the Department for Government Efficiency that's being led by Elon Musk. I'm hopeful that will lead the way in showing what can be done. We've got a bloated government here with obscene levels of wasteful state spending, and we've got to cut it back, because if we don't, you can't keep at any level, whether it's your personal budget, your business budget, or when you're running a country, you can't keep spending more than you're earning. If you do, eventually you go bust, you go bankrupt, because the lenders won't keep lending to you anymore. And I repeat, the UK is in serious financial trouble unless we change course. And that's the message we're putting out to people. And I think people recognise the honesty with which we say it, and the recognition that our policies of cutting regulations, scrapping net zero, tight control on immigration, because actually, if you control your labour supply, if you're short of labour, do you know it's a really good thing, because the price of labour goes up, or businesses invest in capital equipment to replace it. It's literally basic economics. It's like textbook stuff. And that's a good thing, because that means your productivity goes up. We talk a language that business people understand, that folk on the ground understand, not the waffle that we get from the establishment elite in Westminster in central London.
So who would you like to see coming into the United Kingdom, and who would you like not to see coming in?
We believe in smart immigration, where highly skilled people, highly qualified, who want to come and work, who want to integrate in numbers that can be sensibly absorbed into communities, and who want to speak the language. And you can do that. We've done that successfully in the past. We did it in the 80s and 90s. The economy was growing at 2.5% to 3.5% almost every year. So if it ain't work, don't fix it. Sorry, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And the reality is we've had mass immigration over the last couple of years, the majority of whom were not coming here to work. And that means that those who are here, who are earning and paying tax, are suddenly being required to fund a load of benefits for people who didn't want to come to work. That's not fair, that's not sustainable, and under our leadership, that will stop. I repeat, smart immigration is a great thing, but you need to control the population, you need to limit the population. We've never had more people than we've currently got in the UK. We've got plenty of people. We've just got to get many more of them skilled up, trained up, and back into work.
Mr. Tice, one of your own MPs, a man by the name of Rupert Lowe, is reported to have told a journalist, and do correct me if I'm wrong, that Reform is, quote, a protest party led by the Messiah. Now, it sounds a little bit like he's veering off the party line. Nevertheless, Elon Musk seems to like him. What do you think the appeal is?
Look, everybody has their own individual appeal, but Mr. Lowe we've parted company with him from our party. And look, we just push on. We're a great team. We're working hard. And you know what? It's teams that win elections. It's not individuals. And there's a by-election coming up for a constituency in early May. We're going to be fighting that very hard. That'll be a two-horse race. We may well win that. And we just keep making progress from there. As I say, I repeat the clear thing, which is with the right policies and the hardest work and the experience that we've got under the leadership of Nigel Farage, the most experienced political campaigner in the United Kingdom, we can achieve extraordinary things. And there's a lesson for all politicians around the world. if you make your people poorer, if you impose things onto them like mass immigration or net stupid zero that nobody voted for, don't be surprised if you become unpopular and then you get voted out.
Just before we move on to sort of some of the other international stories and to get your party and your perspective on those, I just want to ask you, just wrapping up our discussion about Elon Musk and the like, do you see a chance of Elon Musk somehow or other becoming president of the United States in the future?
Oh, I have no idea. That's way beyond my pay grade. Who knows? Who knows? But I do think that the world actually needs more successful business people being able to, in a democratic way, help run countries. Because I actually think that countries should be run, the profit and loss and balance sheet of a nation should be run as you run a company. You've got to earn more than you spend. You've got to grow. You've got to make, in this case, you've got to make your voters, your taxpayers, happy in the same way that as a leader of a company. You need to make your shareholders happy. Otherwise, guess what? They're going to fire you. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of successful business people through the democratic process, coming in and helping run companies. And as a successful business person myself, the people who voted for me, they really respect the fact that I've got that track record of success, and I think that's a really good thing. And we need to celebrate success. We need to celebrate making money. We need to celebrate hard work. These are all great things.
You painted a picture of a pretty bleak situation faced by the UK, certainly domestically, economically. And I know on the campaign trail in the run-up to last year's UK general election, you talked about Starmageddon, painting a bleak picture of what life will be like under Sir Keir Starmer. But he has achieved something that, not many politicians do, which is pretty unanimous support from the whole political spectrum on the issue of Ukraine and his statesmanship and his leadership on that particular issue. Perhaps you disagree and don't think he deserves that, but I'd like to ask you for your thoughts on that, and also ask you what your party's position is with regards to how to end the war in Ukraine.
Well, one of the joys of leaving the European Union and Brexit is that the Prime Minister of the UK, in this case Sir Keir Starmer, is able to help, in a sense, bridge the gap between the United States under a Trump administration that doesn't like the European Union, understandably, but we have relations with European nations, so that gives an opportunity under the key defensive alliance of NATO is the critical alliance, but quite properly, nations have got to pay their way. They've got to pay at least 2%. In truth, that's not going to be enough. We live in a dangerous geopolitical world, but fundamentally, the United States is the critical strategic ally for the United Kingdom. We must always hold that relationship strong, both from a defense point of view and our biggest single trading partner. And look, with regard to Ukraine, everybody wants peace. Everybody wants the killing to stop. The difficult thing is how you get there. There's huge pressure on so many people. There's massive pressure on President Zelenskyy. No one can imagine the thousands of difficult decisions that he's had to go through every day, every week, every month, as his own people are sadly dying almost every day. Likewise, President Trump's got pressure. He's got pressure. He promised his electorate that he would end this war. That's what he's trying to do. People like politicians that actually deliver on their promises. But what we learned is when you've got, let's remember, most conflicts and wars end up in some form of negotiation, always difficult, always tense, always involving challenging compromises, uncomfortable compromises. Those negotiations are best done behind closed doors. They're best done where you've got all the cards on the table. And our position at Reform is we support the aspirations to get to peace. And I'm not going to criticize world leaders that are right on at the sort of the front line of those negotiations. We wish them well. I'm very keen that one of the cards on the table is the issue of the frozen Russian state assets, $300 billion worth in the West. That's a critical part of the negotiations, amongst others. And, just over 12 months ago, I donated a 5-figure sum personally, bought a 4x4 pickup truck, filled it with other volunteers with first aid medical supplies, drove it to Ukraine, gave it to frontline soldiers, met the people designing the latest drone weapons and software. And I saw firsthand mums weeping over the graves of their sons and their husbands in a cemetery. So I'm very supportive. We're very supportive of Ukraine and its efforts to see off the aggressor of Mr. Putin. But, life is not easy. And we're 3 years into this war, and it absolutely, however difficult, it must be right to try for peace.
Indeed, and there's another major conflict that President Trump is also trying to broker, and it was our top headline in this program today. I'm talking about what's happening in Gaza, where it looks like the ceasefire has all but been shredded, and the killing continues. What's your party's position with regards to Gaza's future?
Well, it's not just Gaza's future, of course, it's actually Israel's future. It's the future of how do you get peace in that region, which has been so difficult for so long. And again, actually, President Trump coming in with a completely different idea from left field, and whilst immediately he was criticised, at least he had a vision. At least he had the courage to say, well, here's a bold vision. If you don't like my idea, what's your idea, folks? And I think it's incumbent on people to say, we've got to come up with something better. Fundamentally, as I've said on numerous occasions, Israel has the right to defend itself. October the 7th was absolutely appalling, and Hamas should not be allowed to have any form of role in governing Gaza. And the simple reality is that Hamas should return all of the hostages, both those alive and sadly some who are already dead. They need to return all of those hostages immediately to Israel, and then this conflict will stop. It's as simple as that. So, and I think then the question is, well, where does it go from here? And I think there's everybody's kind of come to that table. Again, not easy, but the way to stop the killing is to return the hostages.
Just lastly, you mentioned this yourself, the next general election in the United Kingdom probably going to be in 2029, could be before, you never know. Where do you see your party, the Reform Party, at the point of that next election?
Well, if we carry on working hard with the right policies, that's our intention. And if I'm right about the regrettable decline financially of the country, then we've got a really, really good chance of winning the election outright and forming the next government under the leadership of Nigel Farage. And I think I've got great confidence we can turn it around. I've got a simple expression, which is that a bad boss can ruin a good company in about 2 years, but a good boss can turn around a failing company equally in 2 to 3 years. And that's the optimistic vision and hope that we encourage people with.
All right. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us here at Al Arabiya News. The Deputy Leader of the Reform Party, Richard Tice. Thank you very much indeed. That's all we've got time for today's edition of Global News Today. Thanks for watching. Be sure to join us again tomorrow for a summary of some of the best interviews of the week. Until then, bye-bye.
At Al Arabiya News, we go beyond the headlines.
From the latest breaking news to in-depth coverage of global events.
We're not bought or sold. Nobody owns us.
The loss of life, the destruction of property. The conflicts are such a terrible thing.
Context and analysis to help you see the full picture.
The world is in a very dangerous place.
Join us on Al Arabiya News,
It's very impressive.
where knowledge meets perspective.
thank you so much for joining Al Arabiya. I want to kick off by asking you to sort of walk me through how you view your role within NATO, because women today are under pressure in various parts of the world and, frankly, in the West.
So first of all, thank you for the invitation, the opportunity to have this moment of exchange about a very important topic, not only women in NATO, but I would say on women across the globe and about our rights and the general pushback, I would say, that we are facing today. The role I have at NATO, I'm the NATO Secretary General Special Representative for Women, Peace and Security, is not new. I'm the fourth Special Representative. The position was established in 2012. But after 12 years, I have to say that despite the progress that we have made within the alliance, there is still much to do. Of course, the work I do within NATO is around the mandate of the alliance. So it's specific about the role of women and peace and security. So we do not cover other issues. But of course, what we do contributes to advancing gender equality. And it is also stated in our latest strategic concept endorsed in Madrid in 2022 that advancing gender equality is a reflection of the common values of the alliance. So what I do is really to look at everything that the alliance does to make sure that gender perspectives are included. What does this mean? It means that every time we take a decision, both at political and a military level, we have to make sure that we consider the diversity of the population. Population is made by half by men and the other half by women, so we cannot take decision without considering that security is perceived in a different way by men and women.
No doubt. How concerned are you when you see President-elect Trump's pick for defense saying that women shouldn't be in combat roles?
This is a topic that has been discussed over the decades around the globe. The hope was that we had overcome the barriers, the cultural barriers. Certainly we have overcome the legal barriers. So everywhere across allies and also in our partners, countries, women are part of the armed forces. In different extents, I would say across NATO allies, we have an average of 12%. So if we look at the population, as I said, 50% made by women, there is still a big gap to cover this percentage. I think that we still have a lot of work to overcome cultural barriers and change the mindset. We are not all at the same stage. So this conversation will certainly be put at the table, but there is a general consensus that women have to be part of the military forces. And we have proof that nowadays, if we look at Ukraine, how incredible women are fighting now on the front line. Since the full-scale invasion, a lot of women have joined voluntarily, and that's very important to say, that they were not obliged to do it. They are around 60,000 now in the armed forces. More than 40,000 are civilians, but the rest are military, and 5,000 are fighting on the front line alongside with their male colleagues.
If the United States rolls back women's role in the military, and I mean in combat positions, does that weaken the NATO alliance and the NATO mission?
I'm not expecting this change to happen. Of course, I'm expecting maybe some conversation around this. But there is a consensus. There are policies in place. This year in Washington, D.C., and our big yearly summit, we endorse a new women, peace and security policy. When we endorse a policy, 32 allies come together and they agree on what is on the policy.
Including the United States.
Including.
Yeah.
Indeed. And this lasts for 5 years. And the policy states very clearly that increasing participation of women in all peace and security efforts, both on the diplomatic and in the military side, is what we have to do if we want to enhance our operational effectiveness. Yeah. And this is where my work leads, to the implementation of this policy that will be translated next year in a new action plan. We are working on it. And this is where I will concentrate my efforts.
Yeah. Talk to me about this. You mentioned Ukraine and the role of women there in combat positions that they've taken on as an act of necessity. There's a lot of conversation, of course, about how that war may come to a conclusion. In your mind, are women better prepared to take on roles not just in the military now, but also in government in Ukraine?
I think as historically we have seen how wars change the role of women within the society. They open up different possibilities because men go to the front line. In this case, the front line is both physical and also on the space, because we see the war in Ukraine played on the hybrid space and cybersecurity, but also with very old technique on the front line. Women have filled the position in Ukraine as they did in the past during the First World War and Second World War. We see incredible women in politics at governmental level. We see women on the front line and covering all roles in the society. Even in the defense industry recently, women have stepped up and take more position. So I think this has worked as an accelerator for the society, and I expect that women will continue to play an important role in the resolution of the conflict and in the post-conflict era, where we hope a just peace will happen soon, and we will see women to continue to take their important position.
When are we going to see a NATO Secretary General who is a woman? Because I know that was something that was mooted at the time, at the last round of conversations about this.
There was a lot of conversation about this. We need to find the best candidates. I will always say there are some requirements, and requirements are that the Secretary General has to be a former Prime Minister or a President. And this is where the conversation has to be broader.
Yes.
Because the point is, why don't we have more women in politics covering this position? Because automatically then we could have more candidates for the position of the Secretary General. So now we have just welcomed our new Secretary General, Mark Rutte, but as you might heard, this week he announced a Deputy Secretary General, who is a woman and from North Macedonia, and she will join us in supposedly a few weeks. And she's the second one in the history, so it's already a progress. And I think maybe next one could be.
Could it be Giorgia Meloni?
She's read on my mind, because the conversation we had, it's also about the South and the rotation. You know, in alliance,
Exactly.
we're trying to rotate, and sometimes, I mean, we see a tendency to have a Secretary General coming from the northern countries, and there was a conversation about the South, but the requirements didn't come together. So one option could be to change the requirements, and the other is to see more prime minister in the South. So, of course, Giorgia Meloni could be a candidate in the future.
Walk me through this. Today, the rest of this region continues to reel over what we've seen happen in Afghanistan, and I'm talking about the subjugation of women and girls. Obviously, that was an area of serious concern for NATO, and when coalition forces were there. In your mind, what is the responsibility of NATO today to those women that we promised a future and then abandoned?
That's a difficult conversation to take. You know that NATO operates under mandates, and when we operate out of our area of responsibility, we do based on resolution of the United Nations Security Council. We withdraw, the mission is over. So as an alliance, we do no longer have a responsibility there collectively, because we are no longer present. But of course, allies, individually and bilaterally and in different contexts, such as
and
the
as human
United
beings.
Nations. Yes, and they continue to provide support. The situation is very worrisome. There are no words to describe what happened. And I think that individually, as I said, a human being, and with our respective roles at national level, we have to continue to speak out about what is happening there, and to fight for women's rights, because the silence will really put them, you know, in a we will forgive about them, even if we don't do. But in the global conversation, you see, if you read the newspaper, it doesn't really come on the news so often.
What do you think is the solution there in your mind? Because obviously there is an ability of nations who are giving aid to Afghanistan to exert pressure on them.
If I could have a solution, you know, I would try to put this, implement it. I found that extremely difficult. What I'm doing on my side is to continue dialogue with women from Afghan and see if there is a way to support. One of the focus is always how to train women to create space for dialogue for them, in terms of dialogue also with the Taliban or mediation processes. And I know that there are several women who are also present in Doha a few years ago that continue the dialogue and try also to train younger generation to make sure that they will have the possibility to play a role and to exercise their right.
When you come to a forum like this one, based in the United Emirates, a country that has promoted women, not just to positions in government, also mandated their participation on boards in the private sector, are you encouraged by what you see and how the region is evolving.
Indeed, I am very much. I'm very happy to be here and to have the opportunity to engage in person, because I think this is the best way when then you have a concrete example that you can share. When people ask me, what do you do? It's difficult to explain then if you don't have stories to tell. And changing the narrative is what we absolutely have to do. So it's a very positive example, and I'm really looking forward to attending the forum tomorrow.
Tell me this, what is missing in your mind from the global dialogue for women? Because when we speak about this from a business perspective, we talk about quotas and we talk about a number of women on boards. One woman feels alone, 2 women has a friend, and then 3 women can make a change. But in your mind, from a governance perspective, from a security perspective, what needs to change?
I think it's a question of the cultural change I was mentioning earlier. And it's about gender, what we call gender responsive leadership. We focus a lot on the participation of women, but we still find resistance, cultural barriers. And sometimes women are there because government decide to do, and then speak at global level, not referring to the local situation. But at the end, there is no real willingness to integrate. So it's more a token than a reality. So I think that what we have to look is the change of mindset of who is in power today, which in the normality are men. So we have to look into what we call the gender responsive leadership to say that to train, to dialogue with both men and women together, to understand the benefit that the entire society will have if women take on more position at high level. It's not for women, it's not helping women to do something, when they say, I'm helping my wife. No, it's not about this. Because in the moment where the dynamic changes, men will benefit from this different dynamic. They will have more time for the children. They have more time even for discussion and conversation, not under the pressure. And the solution that will be found will be better solution because they will really bring the perspective of the entire society. So this topic of the gender responsive leadership is something I advocated for and I put as a first goal of the new policy at NATO, because I think that in a male-dominated environment, while we work to increase the number of women, we have also to work with the men who are present to make sure that we can reach the same high-quality solution in a shorter time.
Bring them with us.
Yes.
Irene, it's great to have you here at Al Arabiya. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
At Al Arabiya News, we go beyond the headlines.
From the latest breaking news to in-depth coverage of global events.
We're not bought or sold. Nobody owns us.
The loss of life, the destruction of property. The conflicts are such a terrible thing.
Context and analysis to help you see the full picture.
The world is in a very dangerous place.
Join us on Al Arabiya News,
It's very impressive.
where knowledge meets perspective.
From the White House to Gaza, Kiev to Beijing, elections, economics and the environment compete with conflicts and other complex issues for our attention. In an age of fake news, deepfake and artificial intelligence,
They've got to have a vote and a say.
it's important to look beyond the loudest voice to understand the truth. From newsmakers to groundbreakers,
My campaign is going very well.
presidents, prime ministers, princes and peacemakers, and cultural tastemakers.
As Arabs, as Middle Eastern, we're too emotional.
Join me on the Riz Khan Show for empowering conversation.
A very warm welcome to the British Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology, Peter Kyle. It's indeed a great pleasure to have you here with us on Al Arabiya channel. Your Excellency, as this marks your first visit to Saudi Arabia, and you're moving now also after that to Doha. Could you share with us more about the purpose of the visit?
Well, Saudi Arabia and the United Kingdom, we are great partners. We have a historic partnership, and its partnership means sharing and it means learning from each other. So these sorts of trips are really important. For me to come here has been a great opportunity to talk about some of the things that the new government in Britain is doing, but also just to learn. And there's an awful lot to learn from here, and it's been a great time doing it.
Yeah. So, Your Excellency, what is your vision for enhancing the collaboration between the UK and Saudi Arabia in science and technology and innovation?
Well, our partnerships between Saudi Arabia and the United Kingdom are long-standing, but there's nothing that beats being here. So I wanted to get here as quickly as I can so that we can deepen some of the routes for the future. There's so many exciting possibilities here to explore, and I had a great time having an exchange earlier with His Excellency Al Swaha, and exploring, who is my counterpart, and exploring all the opportunities we have between the briefs that we have, which are all in the really exciting, fast-growing economic opportunities of the future. So these sorts of exchanges are really important, and if we get it right, which we're both determined to do, will create new opportunities for wealth and job creation into the future.
What strategies is the UK implementing to strengthen its position as a leader in AI on the global stage?
The Prime Minister launched just last month the AI Opportunities Action Plan. That's increasing our infrastructure for data hugely. We're increasing our compute by a factor of 20, for example. We're also bringing AI into our government so that the productivity and the way we deliver for citizens and deliver government is changing profoundly. But also we're transforming the relationship between citizen and state by use of technology. So all of these things are underway in Britain at the moment. They're also underway in Saudi Arabia, which is part of the basis of the conversations that I've been having with my counterpart, the Secretary of State here, and we were having a great conversation today about all of the things that he and you have achieved in Saudi Arabia, and then comparing it to what we're doing. It's really exciting, some of the opportunities to learn from each other. Sometimes one of us has got there a bit further than the other, but that's where we learn, and some of us have also got information and insights we can share. And of course the open sharing nature of the relationship between Britain and Saudi Arabia is really important.
How can partnerships with Gulf countries contribute to shared goals in areas like renewable energy and clean technology?
Gulf countries are investing heavily in climate technology. And Britain is also investing heavily, but of course, because of the two geographies, because of the two slightly separate histories of scientific endeavour, it means we're very complementary in the way that we're doing it. Britain will be a great market for investing in climate technology, but also we have the expertise and scientific communities, including Oxford and Cambridge and some great leading universities, and also spin-outs in private sector, where there can be also a great exchange. These are the sorts of things that you can only fully explore if you take the time to come here, and that's why being here today, meeting people, seeing it, seeing the organisations, also seeing the role that women play in technology in Saudi Arabia, which is something that you should be incredibly proud of. It's been quite striking. Well, I'm glad, because also it was quite exhilarating for me to see and to go to, for example, the Garage, which is an innovation hub, an incubator for technology and innovation, and to see a lab that was run by a woman, mostly staffed by women, using AI to tackle some medical bio challenges that are out there is really quite extraordinary to see.
So, Your Excellency, regarding the UK economy, what steps is the UK taking to ensure that AI has a positive impact on economy and create more job opportunities?
Well, the first thing we're doing is not over-regulating AI so that so innovation can emerge from within the United Kingdom and we can harness it as swiftly as we can. But we have tasked all regulators to make an assessment of how AI will impact the sectors that they regulate so that we can make sure it's deployed safely. Because if people don't feel safe, they won't safely explore and feel comfortable exploring all the opportunities that digital technology offers to modern society. So we're trying to get that balance right. I think we're doing a great job with the third largest market for AI in the world. We also have the scientific community, which means we can develop it and deploy it as well. We've got some way to go. Not all parts of the British economy are taking up AI as swiftly as we'd like, but we're working really hard to find the measures that we can take to tackle that. Because once we do, there'll be huge opportunities for productivity, which means people and individuals can explore their full talent in the economy, but we as a country can get our #1 priority for this government going, which is economic growth.
Yeah. So talking about that, let's now talk about the education in the UK. What plans does the UK have to enhance the education and capacity building in science and technology, both domestically and through the international partnerships?
Well, firstly, this is a really exciting time for skills and skills development in the United Kingdom. We're undertaking the biggest review of our national curriculum for secondary education for a whole generation. The voice of my department and the needs of science and technology and the needs of those innovative technologies which are emerging are being placed front and centre in that review. We also have a new department, or the new unit called Skills England. That unit is there to make sure that those emerging skills will find the right place in the economy. And those people who are looking at this from other countries, Britain is a great place to come and work. If you've got great skills and you want to be somewhere, whether it's one of our leading universities, whether it's a company which is doing new and really exciting things, it's a great place to come and use your skills, fulfill your potential, and start building those international links and partnerships, which we're celebrating here on this visit.
I'm sure it is a great place there. Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for your time. It's actually a great pleasure to have you here with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Arabiya News, we go beyond the headlines.
From the latest breaking news to in-depth coverage of global events.
We're not bought or sold. Nobody owns us.
The loss of life, the destruction of property. The conflicts are such a terrible thing.
Context and analysis to help you see the full picture.
The world is in a very dangerous place.
Join us on Arabiya News,
It's very impressive.
where knowledge meets perspective.
From the White House to Gaza, Kiev to Beijing, elections, economics and the environment compete with conflicts and other complex issues for our attention. In an age of fake news, deep fake and artificial intelligence,
They've got to have a vote and a say.
it's important to look beyond the loudest voice to understand the truth. From newsmakers to groundbreakers,
My campaign is going very well.
presidents, prime ministers, princes and peacemakers, and cultural tastemakers.
As Arabs, as Middle Eastern, we're too emotional.